Hi, welcome back guys, this is your friend, WTFW with another fiction. What if Deku to do's rescue mission for Katsumi now? Before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Once the meeting was over, Mikumo walked out, still clueless as to what those missions were that Nezu was talking about. He made his way over to his bedroom, opening the door and slipping in, making his way over to his bed, where he fell onto the cushion, burying his head in the pillows. The young man was still tired, but since there is still sunlight outside, he decided to not sleep, instead just take in the comfort of the pillow and bed. Minutes passed, and the dark-haired male continued to just lay there, lost in thought, debating what he wanted to do. He was about to grab his phone, maybe see if he had any messages from his friends, when there was a knock at his door. 3 quick, hard knocks. Yokimaru. Come in. Mikumo calls to the door, which opens hardly a moment later, right as Mikumo sat up, rubbing his tired eyes. Yokimaru walks in with a suitcase in hand, silver, similar to the Mikumo has known ever since he got his first hero costume. A hero suitcase, just what Mikumo had been waiting for, longing to be able to get his hands on. The blonde man walked over to Mikumo's desk, laying the case there as he says, "They finally got your suit done. I'm just going to lie it here. Make sure you be responsible, and make sure you don't do your hero work too tired. In fact, I'd recommend getting some sleep before your first patrol." Mikumo groans in protest at Yokimaru's words, tossing himself back towards his pillows as the man walks out, shutting the door behind him, and mumbling something along the lines of, "Still acts like a child." Instead of immediately going to sleep, Mikumo reaches for his phone, reading through the conversation his friends were having through text, despite the fact that they were all in the same room. They were just going over their day, letting Mikumo know just how boring it was, and all the things they didn't get to do. The dark-haired male rolls his eyes with a smirk on his face as he reads Tenya's attempt to get everyone to stop ranting about their day, and instead try to be a little more positive. Izuku Midoriya. Ida. It's perfectly fine for everyone to rant. You guys are living in a literal shit show RN. Mikumo looks at his group chat name and quickly goes to change it, not wanting to fuck himself up with his name since he was probably going to be in chat relatively often. Izuku Midoriya changed their name. Apparently a commission favorite. Uravidii 3. A little too honest, buddy. A little too honest. Tape dispenser. XD Elmao. Tape dispenser. I'm totally changing name, man. You still suck at names. Apparently a commission favorite. I rude. Uravidii 3. Says the guy with the hero name Deku, cause I called it cute, and said it sounded like, you can do it, but was apparently supposed to mean the complete opposite. Apparently a commission favorite. SHHHHH. Tape dispenser changed apparently a commission favorite's name. Kicking Thessamasses. Kicking Thessamasses. Isn't that one honest too? Piliofrox, yee. But it's funny. Tenyaida. Guys, can we not go on a nickname changing spree? Some of us may get confused. Icy Hot changed their name. Might it sucks. Tenyaida. Fair enough. Kicking Thessamasses. XD. Uravidii 3. Elmao. Tape dispenser. Holy shit XD. Deciding to let their chaos continue for a little while, Mikumo puts his phone on his nightstand once more and lays his head against his pillow, finally letting his eyes close as he tries to drift off to sleep, doing his best to not open his eyes once more. Eventually, Mikumo did manage to sleep, once more finding himself in a nightmare. Another reminder about the future he was trying his best to change. You know, man, you still stink. Denki tells Izuku as they walk through the city. Mina and Katsuki walking just a little ahead, the explosive blonde's hands stuffed into his pocket, as best as he could make them with the large gauntlets on. Mina held an excited skip while they moved ahead, happy to be out and about. Never happy whenever US still has everyone standing around inside for long periods of time. It's true. We may have gotten you to shower a few times in the week, We got you back in school. But that doesn't mean you're gonna smell pretty the entire time you're out here now," Mina says, turning to walk backwards, her hands held behind her back as they walked. Well, damn, Izuku isn't a complete dumbass. Probably already knows he smells like shit. Katsuki replies, sparing Izuku a quick glance as he says, "And the nerd's already gonna care even less since he's spending more time kicking ass cause of All Might." It had been about a week and a half since they had lost the former symbol of peace, and that had been the moment Izuku had quickly started ignoring his phone, probably picking it up once a day to talk to one or two people, generally Katsuki. They had both looked up to Toshinori for so long that it only made sense to contact him, comfort each other through the loss. The other two fall silent, Mina once more turning back around to walk forward, the happy energy she held moments before vanishing as she fell right back into looking around, trying to complete the patrol that they were allowed to do. Pain flared up in the back of Izuku's head, and he quickly turned around, almost shouting, "Look out," as he went to look for the danger. Everyone already at the ready to attack, keep themselves safe from danger. Acid was already starting to form in Mina's hands, ready to throw it at any second, electricity emitting from Denki, and explosions popping in Katsuki's hands. One for All zigzagged throughout his skin before he spotted the danger running along the rooftops, a Namu that didn't seem to be a low or high rank one. They could take care of this one. Izuku jumped into the air, latching onto the windowsills for brief moments, getting closer and closer. Katsuki followed Izuku, using his explosions to get up there, and even grabbing Izuku by the waist as the blonde started to pass the green-haired teen. They got up there quickly, running towards the Namu, who let out an ear-piercing screech, head tossed back before its bulging eyes turned to focus on the two teens once more, fingers splayed out and menacingly curled, long daggers emitting from just behind the nail. The dark blue arm raised into the air before coming down towards both boys, who quickly went in opposite directions, easily dodging the first attack. But the Namu seemed to quickly be registering their fighting style, its attacks becoming quicker and quicker, Izuku and Katsuki making much more narrow escapes from the daggered fingers. They had to get attacks in, and they had to do it fast. "Deku, use float and get into the air for a sec," Katsuki shouts to Izuku, who was on the opposite side of the Namu from the blonde. Already having an idea about what Katsuki was about to do, Izuku activated the quirk, using One for All to place him even further into the air, Katsuki taking a moment to make sure Izuku was far enough, and then pulled the pin on his gauntlets for the first time in a long while. The explosion was aimed more to the head of the Namu, avoiding most destruction to the building, and getting a really good attack on the Namu. Izuku lowered himself back down to the ground, only to hear two screams nearby, and the shattering of glass. In a panic, Izuku and Katsuki ran over to the ledge of the building, looking down to see what it was that caused the noise, getting there in just enough time to see Mina completely disappear into the window, and Denki falling from the window ledge, fingers already bleeding heavily, looking like they were barely hanging on to his hand. The freckled teen jumped off the ledge, as did the blonde. Katsuki went into the window that Mina disappeared into, and Izuku went after Denki, his gloved hand reaching out, trying to grab his electric friend. But he already wouldn't have been able to do that, Denki already way too far ahead. So Izuku was there, way too far behind to grab the other teen, and watched as the blonde hit the ground with a sickening splat, and felt the many droplets of blood hit his face and clothes. The shock almost made Izuku forget to stop falling himself, and just barely managed to save himself with float, only a couple feet away from Denki's body when he finally stopped falling. Immediately, Izuku's mind started going through everything he should have done differently. How he should have used Black Whip too. How he should have paid better attention to what was going on with Mina and Denki, instead of just abandoning them there on the road. He should have expected them to try and follow after, help, make sure Izuku and Katsuki were okay. Izuku wanted to turn away. He really did. But he was stuck, couldn't look away, felt too bad that he wasn't able to save his friend. It was another two screams, one in pain and filled with fear, and one filled with anger, that pulled Izuku's attention away from the blonde still pouring out of Denki and surrounding him. The dark-haired teen quickly turned around, using a weak air strike with one for all to get him higher, closer to the building and the window, hoping to save the last two people here. That was when Katsuki dove out of the window, Mina tucked between his arm and side with one hand, the gauntlets helping to further support her. The living blonde reached out to Izuku, grabbing the one for all user and tossing him over his shoulder, using explosions to get them out of there. Izuku looked into the building, the higher-ranked Namu in there, and Izuku locking eyes for a long while. The Namu's dark skin shinier in some places, indicating that something liquid was spilled on it, or was coming from it. It was Izuku who broke eye contact first as the trio soared through the air, explosions loud and powerful. In all honesty, the freckled boy wasn't even sure how Katsuki was holding them while using explosions, but it definitely must have taken a lot of practice. It didn't take too long for them to be out of sight of the Namu, and to land on another rooftop. Katsuki quickly put the both of them down, and while Izuku still faced away from the other two, he said, "We left Denki behind. We don't even know if that other Namu was dead, and that one that you just went up against definitely wasn't." "Shut up. We already know Dun's face is gone. No point in peeling him off the ground while we run for our lives right now, not with that Namu in there, and who knows how many others," Katsuki says, his voice filled with panic. It was that made Izuku turn around and look down to see his childhood friend trying to bring Mina back, trying to get her to open her eyes once more. She was covered in blood, especially on her face. It made Izuku's breath hitch in his throat, kept him frozen there, just like he was earlier with Denki. This isn't fucking fair. How do we just lose 2 extras in one day? This isn't fucking fair, not fair. Mina didn't wake up again, and Katsuki stormed off in a rage, leaving Izuku there while the blonde went back to Yua. Mina held carefully in his hands while he took her back to the school. Mikumo was happier than a child on Christmas when he was able to wake up again, happy that he was no longer stuck in that dream. Not that he had to see it in the first place. He already had seen that dream plenty of times, had the memories replayed for him to suffer through. But it would never change the fact that he was happy to once more wake up and find some way to change that from happening to his friends. Well, they probably weren't going to be his friends again in this timeline, but he'd still be able to be near them, and would still do his best to make sure they never suffered like that again. Tossing his covers off, he quickly reached for his phone, pulling it off of his nightstand, taking a look at the time. It was 2 in the morning, but that had never stopped Mikumo from his patrols long before. His bare feet pressed against hardwood floor as he slid his legs off of the bed and started to make his way over to his desk, where the silver case still remained. Mikumo excitedly opened it, looking over the clothes, and quickly finding himself disappointed at whoever made the shirt. Beneath it was a note, and Mikumo flipped it open, reading it over. They said the window right at his chest in the shirt was to better help with smokescreen, but he always knew that the costume support department were always fans of fanservice, whether they wanted to admit it or not. Heck, they made Ochako's suit more skin-tight, despite the fact that she's literally just starting as a hero in training, and really shouldn't have had something that's skin-tight in the first place. However, Izuku wasn't going to continue to judge, especially since Ochako didn't seem to really mind after the first day she had put it on. It wasn't much of his business anyways, but he knew his own suit was. P.S. We did give you a nice and tiny cloak so nobody even really has to see it in the first place. The end of the letter read, making Mikumo quickly crumple the paper and toss it into the small trash can he had in his room. They better be grateful that I just want to go out for patrol, but I'm telling those assholes that they better fix it later this morning. And I'll even stand in that room and watch them if I have to. That's fucking dangerous to have there of all places, whether I'm fast or not, Mikumo mumbles, but still slips off his clothes to pull on the hero costume. grimacing as he put on the shirt. The suit was simply enough. It was a sleeveless, black shirt that had the collar of it go probably a third up his neck. It fit a little snug to his skin, but the pants were pretty loose, similar to Katsuki's from when he was still alive. The bottom of the suit in almost complete tribute to the blonde. However, things naturally had to be changed up a little, so the utility belt that held some of the basic equipment he'd need for quick medical care had suspenders hanging from them, instead of the strap that went down Katsuki's leg a little, and connected to this other strap that went around his leg. The boots were still pretty similar though, still black to fit the rest of his outfit's theme, but the soles of the boots a dark red. Mikumo honestly tried to avoid green like the plague with this costume, so he just chose to add in some red color to match the colored contacts he chose. He did leave the cloak behind though, deciding that it looked ridiculous, and that the white fabric that just barely covered his chest just wasn't worth wearing. Once he finally had the costume on, he decided to slip out the window again, using one for all to leap onto the closest rooftop, pulling himself up and onto it, and then continuing to run, looking for anything nearby that he might be able to help with. Crime was generally pretty high around this time, and it honestly sucked that most of the top-ranked pros were daytime pros. But at least there were plenty of underground pros at this time. Mikumo was excited when he finally spotted the first crime, something that was able to feel a little normal to him. He honestly had gotten to miss taking down villains over the past few days, and was bored to death just standing around in the commission. In all honesty, the only entertaining thing before this has been meeting Toshinori, and getting to start helping the symbol of peace train Izuku. But then there was also his friends starting to get into contact with him, so that definitely helped. Hopping down into the alleyway that the villain was in, he slowly snuck up, not letting himself activate one for all, trying to get used to the idea that he can't frequently use it like he used to. He still dealt with the thief quickly though, and handed the woman her purse back, giving her a quick smile before running off again, and looking for any other danger. In the end, he had taken down a good amount of villains, successfully taking care of each one he passed by, and kept going until the sun had fully risen into the sky. It was the last day of the weekend, and Mikumo wanted to maybe enjoy a day out, enjoy the peaceful world that he was currently living in, and tell his friends about it, maybe send pictures. He knew they missed the beauty of the outside, and how the wall got in the way of it far too often. They'd want the pictures, Mikumo was sure of it. So, busy night? An extremely familiar voice asks, just behind the young pro. It made him jump, and turned to face none other than Shota Aizawa, who was leaning against the alley wall, arms crossed, his face half buried in the scarf. Yep, yours, Mikumo asks, nervously looking at the underground pro. That only seems to make Shota more skeptical though, his fingers clearly tightening their grip on his arm, moving up just a little, closer to his scarf. I don't exactly tell people who I just met about my workday. Not fair that you expect me to answer, and you don't. I'm asking you this one last time. Who are you? Shota's right hand flies to his scarf, already pulling the fabric away from his neck, and ready to attack, or restrain Mikumo. Your future you a pain in the ass. Mikumo gives a quick grin before running off, and somehow managing to outrun the underground pro hero as he ran into a different alley, and then into this older building's unlocked door. Thank goodness there wasn't anyone in it, and it was abandoned anyway. Izuku's pencil quickly tapped against his chin, while he stared at his notebook in thought, looking over his notes he had on One for All, trying to see if there was anything he needed to add, any further questions he had about it. He was extremely grateful for the help he was receiving from Mikumo and Toshinori, but it didn't mean he wasn't already questioning just how far they'd be able to take him before the exams. He'd never had quirk training before, and this was the symbol of peace and someone from the commission who had just found him, and practically said, "You're cool, we'll train you." With a sigh, Izuku placed the pencil down on his desk, burying his hands into his hair, looking at his phone, and then back to his notebook. He wanted the answers, but knew his training would start again tomorrow, once his school day was over. He was told to enjoy the weekend, especially since it was probably going to be his last weekend without training for a long while. That way they could work on getting him more muscle mass in the short time they had. Izuku knew he could trust these guys, but he honestly was beginning to doubt he'd be able to do it as he stared at the packet to the left of his notebook. The freckled teen reached over to grab the packet, looking at the time frame for each thing they'd have him do, and what schedule was expected of him for the next 10 months. And he would hopefully keep something similar to for the rest of the time he would spending training to be. And as a hero, he could do this. He could. He was given a chance, and his idol believed in him. Someone Izuku hardly knew believed in him. Okay, that last part does sound a little funny. Hardly knows the guy, and Mikumo hardly knows him. But Mikumo chose to support Toshinori, and Izuku was excited that he did, that he would provide the educational support he'd need with One for All. But back to the pressing matter. Enjoying his weekend. Finally getting out of his seat, he pushed the chair back in, and then starts to make his way over to his door, opening it, and then starting to look for his mother. Hope he could find her somewhere in this apartment. It was small, but sometimes Izuku didn't hear when she says she's going to go shopping or something. So Izuku's just keeping his fingers crossed that she didn't go anywhere. Sure enough, Inko was in the kitchen, doing some paperwork, leaning over the counter as the pen moved across the paper. The teenager waited in the hallway, waiting for a moment that his mother wasn't working on the paperwork, or at least when she seemed done with that one. While he waited, her pulled at his fingers while his bright green eyes watched Inko, waiting for her to be done. A quick flip of the paper, and Izuku said, "Hey, Mom." Inko jumped, the pen flying out of her hand as she turned towards Izuku, eyes wide. Only once she had fully registered, it was Izuku, which didn't take long did she let out a sigh of relief, holding her hand close to her chest and smiling as she said, "What is it, dear?" "I wanted to ask you if I could go out for a while today, just on my own. I wanted to start training soon, and this is kinda the last weekend I'm really going to be taking off." Izuku explains, giving his mother a nervous smile as he waits for her to reply. "Just keep your phone with you, and let me know if anything happens, okay?" Inko tells him, giving her son a soft smile before walking over, cupping her hands over his cheeks before giving his forehead a quick peck. Izuku smiles wide as he nods, and says, "Of course, I'll be sure to be careful." Not too many minutes later, Izuku was slipping his bright red shoes onto his feet, and making his way out of the door, bidding his mother farewell as he walked out. He was still wearing his black shorts and white t-shirt that he'd been wearing all day. But who was he to care? It's not like he was seeing anyone today, and this was honestly the best you were going to find him dressed on the daily. Unless there was some event that required he wear something better, of course. But even then, he didn't really have much of any of that in his closet in the first place, and chances of him being invited to anything in general was slim. It was a bright, clear day outside, far too bright for Izuku's preferences at the moment, as he walked around with a squint for the next few minutes, stuck having to adjust to the bright light. He was extremely grateful when he finally did, and started to run down the street, and to one of his favorite shops, the one that sold the notebooks and pens he always bought. It was really simple stuff, yeah, but they never seemed sold out on the items, unlike the bigger stores that people ran to for the cheap items. He excitedly opened the door, running to the shelf he had gotten himself so familiar with, only to spot Mikumo there, reaching out to grab a notebook himself, a small smile on his face as he did so. "Akatani-sensei?" Izuku seemed to yet again startle someone just by saying their name, and the notebook in Mikumo's hand quickly dropped to the ground before he nervously laughed, saying, "Sorry about that. Just wasn't expecting to see you here." "Oh, no, I apologize. I didn't mean to startle you." Izuku's hands wave in the air before he starts bowing profusely, trying to make sure the man knew just how sorry he really was. No, hey, kid, it's all right, I promise. No need to overreact so much, Mikumo says, walking forward and placing his hand on Izuku's shoulders, stopping Izuku from bowing any more than he already had. Izuku gave a nervous grin as he stared at the floor, honestly a little embarrassed. Was there something you had wanted to get? I mean, kind of. I generally come here to just look at the notebooks. Think about maybe getting a new one. I have to keep reminding myself that I have plenty already though. You didn't bring any money today, did you? Izuku pauses, slowly turning to look at his new teacher, whose face was almost completely blank, other than the slightly raised, questioning eyebrows. The teenager looks away once more as he quietly says, "No, I didn't." "Then I guess I'll get you one. Might want one for your notes on that new quirk." Mikumo hands Izuku the notebook, who hesitantly starts to grab it. And only once he has it within his grip does he say, "Thank you. But I already have notebooks where I write people's quirks down in them. And I'm sure it wouldn't hurt to just write the notes for me down in there." "Nah, you don't want to mix those together. And besides, I'm not going to give you 1 page worth of messy notes of education on this quirk. And if you want to show someone their page, say, future classmates in UA when you make it. If I make it, you'll make it. But as I was saying, if you're to show someone their page, they may be curious, flip through and look at the others. It's best you have something personal for your own quirk." "I see your point. With the notebook. Child, you better get my point on you getting your ass into UA." Okay. And with that, both of them made their way to the counter, 2 notebooks in hand, and 1 pack of pens. Mikumo did as he said he was going to do, and paid for the items, handing a notebook to Izuku, and keeping one for himself, as well as the pack of pens. "Why'd you get that many pens? There are smaller packs, and shouldn't you maybe already have some?" "I don't know, you just seem like the type of person who does a lot of writing," Izuku tells Mikumo, who was flipping through the blank pages as they walked out of the shop, and to the park, where Mikumo said he could maybe talk a little more about the quirk, if Izuku was up to it, of course. Naturally, he was. Commission hadn't exactly gotten me any yet. Spent some of the money I had left over that they kinda handed me once they decided my training was over. Mikumo explains, eyes glancing over the pages as if there are already words there, or words he desperately wanted to fill the pages with. "But I should hopefully be getting my first paycheck soon." Did you just spend money on me that you were given to use for yourself? Without even actually being paid yet?" Izuku asks, his jaw dropping as he stared at the older male in disbelief. Was he reckless with money or something? He probably wasn't even handed that much in the first place. And he's out here buying things for Izuku. "Yeah, but it doesn't matter too much anyway. I got to get what I wanted." Mikumo replies, tucking the notebook and pack of pens between his arm and his side, stuffing his hands into his pockets while he continues to look ahead, and eventually saying, "We're here." Izuku and Mikumo continued to walk through the park for a while, looking for a spot where there weren't many people around. It felt like they were walking for a while, but it honestly wasn't too much. Just sort of felt like it since it was starting to warm up. Soon enough, they found a bench, one surrounded by bushes adorned with colorful flowers, and a nearby tree that provided shade. It was a perfect spot, and Izuku was surprised more people weren't around this area of the park. Sure, it was a little far in, but the spot seemed to be worth it. Mikumo walked over to the bench, sitting down and patting the empty spot beside him, already opening up the notebook he held. Izuku walked over, sitting next to his new teacher, flipping to the first page of his own notebook. The older male opened the large pack of pens, handing Izuku one, and said, "Figured you didn't bring any. We weren't exactly expecting to run into each other anyway." Izuku nervously scratched the back of his neck as he says, "Yeah, definitely wasn't expecting to run into you. Oh, but can I have your number in case, if I have any more questions about One for All?" I already got all mites when we were waiting on you to arrive yesterday. Oh, not right now. I'm planning on getting a new phone soon, 'cause I dropped my old one. And now only certain things work. Sorry, kiddo, Mikumo explains. Ah, I get that. Anyway, time to get to work on your one for all notes. And so they did. For almost 2 hours, Mikumo was going over the basics of the quirk, and ways Izuku could try using it. It always felt like the man spoke from experience. But with all the time he probably spent around Toshinori when he was little, Mikumo probably spoke the words he heard from the man, and added the things he had noticed with it, and how it would probably work with Izuku. You see, even when you get done with training, you're still going to get the quirk scrawnier than All Might did when he was first given the quirk. Trust me, I've seen the photos, and have a decent enough idea of how you're going to look by the end of training. However, you're going to have enough muscle to prevent your limbs from flying off of your body each time you use the quirk, Mikumo explains, starting to make a quick doodle in his notebook. So what do you think will happen when I activate the quirk instead? Because even though I'm getting rid of such a huge drawback with the quirk, there's still going to be something big, right? Izuku's pen hovers above his paper as he looks at his teacher, who, instead of answering, was busy drawing. Izuku was at least going to wait for a minute though, see if he was drawing out an example, giving the older male some faith that he was at least heard. Not too much later, Mikumo turned the notebook towards Izuku, where a doodle of the teenager was placed in the corner of the page, dressed in a t-shirt and shorts, arms and legs a squiggly mess, filled in with dark lines. You'll shatter your bones, Mikumo finally answers, his face surprisingly blank for someone who was telling a child that they were going to shatter their bones. Oh, Izuku sort of sat there, blankly staring at the quickly depicted drawing of Izuku shattering his bones. After a few moments, he slowly picked up his own notebook again, writing down, "Will break bones if I can't find another way of safely using the quirk," and then underlined it for good measures. Izuku then pulled his phone out of his pocket, eyes widening before he quickly stuffed it back into his pocket, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I've got to get home. Hopefully we can talk more about the quirk later." "Oh, yeah, I get it. Go ahead and go home. See you tomorrow, kiddo." Mikumo waved as Izuku ran off, staying on the bench while he watched the teenager run off. Izuku waved back before turning back to face the pathway out, holding his notebook in both hands, index finger held between the last pages he was using. As he turns back once more, looking to see if Mikumo was still waving or something, he noticed his teacher wasn't there anymore, a few leaves falling from the tree, right above the spot the man was formerly sitting in. Did Mikumo just jump into the tree? Go him. Izuku was starting to get a little too hungry to debate this much longer, so he just turned back to looking forwards, making his way back home, hoping to arrive before it got too dark. Once Mikumo got back to the commission office, he got back in by sneaking into his window. Again, okay, maybe he just really enjoyed coming in through here instead of the front doors. He was still pretty new here, and new people like to stare at something when it's new. So he felt much better when he got to climb up the windows, testing to see just how quickly he could do so. Good exercise, and it prevented more people from spotting him. As he crawled back into his window, he saw the head of the commission sitting on his bed, her arms crossed as her foot impatiently tapped against the ground. "The front door not good enough for you?" the commission president asks once Mikumo safely stood in his room, window shut behind him. "More fun with the window," Mikumo nervously replies, shrugging as he grins, and then asks, "How long have you been here?" "Not too long, but long enough to know you were out doing something. Nezu called and said Eraserhead was complaining about you, and how Nezu only knew it was you because of the description Eraserhead gave, and how you said that you're Aizawa's next big UA annoyance. So I know you were already on a patrol last night. What were you doing this afternoon?" "Going around the city. Went shopping with the last bit of money I was given," Mikumo explains, showing the woman the notebook he bought, as well as the large pack of pens. Her face was blank as she turned to look at them, finally deciding to stand up, sighing as she did so. Her arms once more returned to her sides as she said, "Your job at UA starts tomorrow, and I hope you're ready for it." Nezu said that he doesn't care if you wear your hero costume or not, but it might feel a little awkward if you don't, especially since all of the other staff does. Ah well, I'm just going to go and fit in with Nezu, and not wear that costume. Speaking of, do you have any word from the support department about what I called them for? They said that they're disappointed in your choice, but are going to take away the little window in your shirt. They did have a lot of complaints about your decision, but at least it'll be made more to your preference again. They're adding something, aren't they? They're adding some fingerless gloves that'll go to about your elbows. The fabric will be thin enough that smokescreen can still work without hindrance, and they'll look good. At least, that's what I've heard from them. Ah, all right. At least it's not that little window again in the shirt. If you're not wearing your costume though, at least pick out a decent enough outfit. I don't want you embarrassing the commission by looking ridiculous. Well, now Mikumo wanted to do something tiny to fuck with her. He didn't want to embarrass himself at all, but he knew how picky the woman could be, so maybe just something tiny enough to mess with her would be fun. When it was time to start getting ready for work the next day, Mikumo chose a white button-up shirt and some black, slightly form-fitting pants that were still a little loose, but not very, and could still let his legs be distinguishable underneath them, instead of making his legs look like these big sticks. Baggy, loose pants had always really been Katsuki's thing, and Mikumo was already testing himself with his new costume. He missed his old one, honestly, but still had to make do with this new one that couldn't hold any similarities to his old one. Once he was done, and ready to run out the door, yes, the actual door this time, he took the liberty of unbuttoning the top button of his shirt, and then starting to make his way down the halls, only to be stopped in the entryway by the commission president. "Good morning, ma'am," Mikumo exclaimed, giving her a smile as he moved to the side, ready to step around her. She quickly reached out though, buttoning the last button on Mikumo's shirt as she said, "This shirt is loose enough on you that you don't need to leave a button unbuttoned. If you're only going to walk out like this, you could at least have them all buttoned up so it doesn't look like you walked out in a hurry and forgot to finish the outfit or got screwed. I'm pretty sure a shirt being like that doesn't give off that last message and is more just something more in style than walking out like a businessman every day," Mikumo replies, ignoring the harsh glare from the commission president. He finally starts walking away from her, walking outside of the building, his hands in his pockets, the card to get him back in the building pressed against his left hand. Only once he knew for sure that he was out of sight from her, he unbuttoned 2 buttons instead of the one, and held a smug grin as he skipped over to UA. He was told that his commission card should get him into the school for a while, at least until he got himself a card to get into the school, and it was said by Nezu himself, so he wasn't exactly going to question it. He just knew he could get into the building, and was excited to be able to do so. He got to have a whole 10 months of no chance of disaster, and he was going to appreciate every last second of it. Every time he had tried to come to UA before, there had always been some sort of attack, and he hardly even got to appreciate his first few days in the building before Tamura attacked, and started to make everything absolutely horrible. Mikumo honestly hoped he could find Tamura before the first attack on their school, the one where he first got the information to find out the schedule, and when he would be able to sneak up on Toshinori, if it comes down to it, and Mikumo doesn't have the Tamura of this timeline locked up. He'd at least going to hope that he has the staff convinced that the students shouldn't be allowed to go to the USG, especially not after the threat that had happened recently, where the press broke in with the assistance of Tamura and caused a huge panic through all of the students. Mikumo giggled at the memory of that day, remembering how Tenya and Ochako worked together for Tenya to get the attention of everyone, and how ridiculous the engine hero looked once he had done so. That was also the day Mikumo handed over his class rep abilities to Tenya, knowing that he would have been the better class rep anyway. Sometimes Mikumo wonders what it would have been like if he didn't hand over his class rep abilities to Tenya. Ah well, no time for wondering how things could have been. He knew he was far too nervous at the time when he was elected class rep to successfully take on the role, and Tenya was overall the better candidate. He had been there countless times for his peers, and always tried to help them stay in line. Ignoring that time in the first year when he had tried to commit murder. Well, reasonable justification for it. Because Mikumo was literally out to kill all for one, especially for killing his friends and mentors. Those "I refuse to kill anyone" morals felt like they had disappeared a long time ago. Probably did, to be honest. Wait, was I supposed to go stop by Nezu's office? Mikumo questioned himself, stopping in his tracks right as he went to reach for the door, hand already held out to open it. Mikumo's scarred hand reaches up to scratch the back of his neck as he looks around, wondering if there was something that was supposed to give a clue to where he was supposed to be. Nezu had always loved puzzles after all, and you could almost guarantee he had something planned if all he said was, "Yep, you've got the job. See you at school on Monday." Yeah, fun. Honestly, the puzzle could be the entire damn school. Nezu expecting Mikumo to get lost in the school and find himself late to work. To be fair, Nezu could just be trying to make Mikumo overthink this and waste more time by looking for any clues. But the young pro was quickly able to spot the little bit of paper sticking out from between the doorframe and door. The biggest pain was how tall the doors were, and how short Mikumo felt in comparison. However, before he could trouble himself too much and make himself look like an idiot, he opened the door, looking up to make sure it was going to fall to the floor. And of course it was taped to the doorframe, with "For the new U.S. staff member" written in large, neat letters. With a long sigh, Mikumo's shoulders slowly slumped, his eyes rolling before looking back at the paper with frustration. He just wanted to get the damn thing, and was honestly wondering how Nezu got it up there in the first place. Could have asked some of the staff members to hold him as high as they could, or told the staff members to climb on top of each other to tape the paper up there. No matter what he did though, it was annoying as hell, and was going to be a pain for Mikumo to get. Taking a few steps back so he could get some momentum, he gave the paper a hard glare, chanting to himself in his head about how he wasn't supposed to use one for all, keeping the quirk suppressed, and ignoring the urge to let the warmth spread through his body and power up each limb, letting him easily grab the paper. But his quirk was out of question, especially since Nezu already had cameras everywhere. Running forwards, Mikumo makes as high of a jump as he could, desperately reaching out for the paper. But he was still so far off, fingers nowhere near grazing it, and barely even leaving a small flap in the wind. Damn these doors for being so tall, and damn Nezu for whatever method he used to get it up there, and out of reach of the students. After a few more jumps, quick attempts at trying to reach the paper, and with no avail, he finally just started looking at the doorframe, trying to visually measure out just how long it was, and if his new plan would really work. The doorframe was relatively thick, so it shouldn't be too hard, but all it really took was one misstep, and jumping a little too far to the side. But he was going to try it anyway, and do his best to bring back something he spent hours teaching himself in a trash-filled alleyway. And so he quickly started trying to jump from side to side on the doorway, almost slipping a few times, and somehow managing to get to the top, fingers finally getting a grip onto the paper and pulling it away from the doorframe. And then realized his mistake. He forgot to get a good grip, and quickly started plummeting towards the ground. But someone managed to catch him, and fell down to the ground themselves. Mikumo quickly jumped out of their arms, checking his hand first to make sure he still had the paper, and then finally turning to see who it was that made an attempt to catch him. Of course, it was none other than Mirio Tagata. "Kid, you alright? You do know it's pretty dangerous for yourself to grab people falling from high heights, right?" Sure, it wasn't way too high. But are you all right? Mikumo tells the blonde kid, standing there as he waited for an answer, watching as Mirio slowly got up, a slight groan of pain as he did so. His arms already looked like they were going to bruise, and Izuku honestly wouldn't be surprised if they were much darker in color by the time he'd see the blonde again. Yeah, I'm fine. Just figured you'd need someone to catch you after that fall. If you don't mind me asking, what were you doing up there anyway? Mirio began to question, brushing himself off and tenderly massaging his forearms. Starting teaching today, and Nezu is a special little shit. And put a hint on where to find him and where to go all the way up there, Mikumo replies, his expression quickly going from something slightly worried to something that looked completely fed up as he pointed towards the top of the doorframe. Mirio bursts into a fit of laughter, arms overlapping and clutching at his waist as continues his fit of laughter, wheezing out a, "I can't believe you called him a little shit." Definitely sounds like something he'd do though. Oh, so we get a new teacher this year? Nejire Hadu asks, arms held behind her back as she skips over, seeming to hold Tamaki Amajiki's hand in either one or both of her hands, too out of view for Mikumo to be able to tell. Nejire quickly lets go though as she runs over to Mikumo, already letting out a mouthful of questions, saying things like, "What's your name? What are you going to be teaching? Who are you going to be teaching? Hey, how old are you? Did you know you look like you'd fit in with us perfectly?" And so Mikumo ran off after giving her the quick reply of, "I guess you'll find out soon enough." Only once he knew he was out of view of the trio did he open the paper, quickly skimming through it, figuring out just where it was he needed to go. There were instructions to the staff conference room, and luckily, Mikumo didn't have to look over it for long, already knowing just where to find the room. He only needed to know exactly which room he was headed to in all honesty. As soon as Mikumo reached the room, he almost slammed the door open out of pure joy to be there, but kept it a little less on the aggravated lie excited side, and a little bit more on the calm but excited side. In the room, there weren't too many staff members in there just yet, 2 of them sitting at the table, and the other 2 in the room leaning against the walls. Nezu sat in his chair at the end of the table, where all attention from the staff could easily be drawn to him. Chiyo Shuzenji sat in a chair as well, a pack of gummies already sticking out of her hero suit pocket. Mimiri Kayama and Hizashi Yamada stood next to each other, arms crossed as they leaned against the wall, seemingly deep in conversation. "Ah, Akatani, you're here much sooner than I anticipated," Nezu exclaimed, all attention immediately turning towards the younger pro in the doorway. Mikumo gave a quick smile to them all, hands held in front of him, fingers nervously laced together as he walked forwards. "Nezu, sir, where would you recommend I sit?" "I don't exactly want to take a spot that anyone usually sits in," Mikumo asks, standing just behind, and to the right, of Chiyo. Nezu quickly holds out a paw to the seat he wanted Mikumo to sit in, not too far from his seat, and says, "I'm sure Eraserhead wouldn't mind too much. You did say you were going to be his future you a pain in the ass, so I'm sure it would be wonderful to get you started immediately." Despite the obvious flush of red in his cheeks from the embarrassment of that line being repeated to him, the one that he said in the moment, and honestly didn't think through, was being taken seriously. However, he quickly mentally shook it off, shrugging as he said, "Fair enough." Hizashi and Nimiri burst into a loud fit of laughter, Hizashi already clutching his sides as he doubled over, slowly lowering himself to the ground as he wheezed out, "He really said that? To Aizawa of all people?" Nimiri's head was thrown back in her fit of laughter, but she still easily found Hizashi's back, giving it a few harsh pats as she tried to calm herself down. Mikumo honestly didn't get why it was so funny to them, but ah well, they're having fun. At least Chiyo had a much calmer reaction, a grin plastered on her face as she snuck a gummy bear from her pocket, tossing it into her mouth as she rolls her eyes, saying, "You've got to leave that poor guy alone. He's lost enough sleep already." It's all in fun and games. Recovery girl, all fun and games, Nezu says with a grin of his own, his eyes squeezed shut from the wide smile. Soon enough, everyone finally started spilling into the room, trying to get the meeting over before classes started, and to get an update on the whole. Oh, yeah, we have a new staff member that I told literally none of you about. And we're going to have another one next year, who is going to be trained by the new guy. Also, did I mention that this is a guy recommended and trained by the commission? So he'll be perfect help in training. Oh, I don't know, the symbol of peace on how to be a teacher. Before any of that could start though, Shota Aizawa finally walked in, his jaw dropping as soon as he laid eyes on Mikumo, hand flying into the air to point at Mikumo as he said, "When you said you were going to be my next biggest Yua pain in the ass, I assumed Nezu was grabbing a new kid to give me someone in my literally empty class, not a new staff member." Shota quickly threw both of his hands in the air, eyebrows furrowed and face turning to one of impatience and annoyance, looking between both Mikumo and Nezu, trying to figure out what was going on. Not to mention that that's my seat. Principal Nezu, I mean no disrespect, but why didn't you tell me that that guy I was ranting about yesterday was going to be a new staff member? It's all for the fun, Eraserhead. Also, I did encourage him to take your seat so he could start his promise sooner than later. However, we do have a quick meeting to go over, so I would like for everyone to get seated so I can give a quick rundown of what this year and the next will look like, Nezu stated, everyone immediately falling into a hushed tone, except for Shota's harsh mumblings as he walked over to an empty seat, arms crossed, and fingers burying themselves into the dark fabric on his arms. And so the explanation began. The cover-up story that was provided by the commission president and Mikumo easily flowing out of the rat bear dog's mouth, talking about how the commission realized that US staff could use some help, especially if they were taking in All Might as a teacher in the next school year. The symbol of peace would need help, and who better than someone trained by the commission themselves? Gosh, Mikumo wished that this wasn't absolutely oozing with lies, but he had to make do. Nezu went over how their slightly adjusted schedule would look like, and how Shota would be doing a lot of help with the hero training courses for a while, especially since he was completely free, and needed to make sure Mikumo had a basic rundown of how they were going to be doing the teaching for the hero courses. The underground hero did not sound excited to spend hours at a time with Mikumo, teaching students about their quirks and how to train them to be a hero. After this first impression, Mikumo didn't blame the man for only further sinking into his seat. Soon enough, the teachers really had to get going to their classes and start their homerooms, make sure everyone knew what they were doing in the day, and giving their students a small announcement about how some of their training was going to go for a long while. Shota and Mikumo had to stay behind though. That way Nezu could give some basic expectations from the both of them, and make sure Shota knew exactly what he was supposed to help Mikumo with when it came to training all of these kids. Mikumo was steadily starting to wonder why he took on this job. It seemed like hell, and Mikumo could already see why Shota looked tired all of the time. But hey, maybe it would be better once he actually got to work on the teaching part. Conferences are never fun anyways. As soon as both of the pro heroes were dismissed, Shota eagerly got out of his seat, and Mikumo quickly had to chase after, easily keeping himself just at Shota's heels without breaking a sweat. Listen, just don't keep that promise about being a pain in my ass, and I'll tolerate you. Got it? Shota asks, sparing a quick glance to Mikumo as he stuffs his hands into his pockets, finally speaking to the younger pro hero. Yep, got it. Might mess with you just a little, but it's all part of the fun, Mikumo replies with a grin, only for it to quickly fall as Shota gives him one of the rudest glares ever. With a sigh, the younger male says, or not. Still need to learn how to teach these kids, though. Yeah. Just don't get any ideas on how to be a dick. In the end, they ended up standing in the empty Wana classroom, Shota already treating Mikumo like a child, as he told Mikumo to sit at a desk and to start paying attention. The older underground hero already had his chalk in hand, going over some of the basics of teaching the kids, and especially the first years, who would have little to no control with their quirks, even with the basic quirk training provided to kids. However, if they could at least show some control, they were at least worth a shot in Shota's book. And if their personality was good enough too, with a just right amount of heroism powering them through the day. The lesson felt like it dreaded on for forever. But by the time it was finally time to get those classes started, Shota said, "Don't think I'm just letting you start these lessons on your own yet. We still have quite a few things we need to go over. And some things I can only really say during the teaching. So, let's go get those students trained, okay?" "Yeep," Mikumo replies, popping the P as he takes his cheek off of the palm of his hand. An audible sigh slipping past his lips as he practically slid off his seat and made his way to the door. Shota and Mikumo, not even bothering to wipe the chalk off of the board. It's not like anyone was going to be in there to see it anyways. Mikumo was honestly ready to get to the students, but also not. Mainly because he wasn't sure about how frustrating Shota's teaching would be whenever they were actually in front of the students. Mikumo never exactly had to deal with the man's teaching when he didn't like who he was teaching. And the younger pro had definitely gotten off on the foot with Shota. Now to hope he can get on a good page with the man, so his time here doesn't become an absolute hell, and constantly having to try and get away from Shota's analytical eye. That way he can try and fix this timeline before it becomes absolute hell. However, he also wasn't exactly ready for all the introductions he'd have to go through. And he looks of the students who definitely hadn't been expecting a new teacher. At least it wasn't too far in the year, and Izuku would still be able to get to know everyone relatively well before the next school year. He'd also be able to see what a graduation in UA was like, considering that school practically ended for everyone shortly before the end of their first year. That means that even the third years didn't get their graduation and were unable to graduate. It's pretty sad, especially when you think about how close they were to officially becoming real pro heroes. But now wasn't the time to mope over the past. He wasn't sitting in the peace of his room, and still had to teach. Getting lost in thought, and mourning over friends that he couldn't bring back was definitely not on the agenda. "Alright, we're here. I'll go ahead and go in first. That way they'll at least quiet down enough that we can speak," Shota explains as they arrive at the large training ground. The one that Mikumo had fought in during his first hero course training match, when he was up against Katsuki. It honestly felt nice to be here again, especially after avoiding it for so long. "Makes sense," Mikumo replies, following behind Shota as they walk into the training grounds and make their way through some of the small streets and to a larger one that was on the left side of the facility. There, all 21st year hero course students stood, excitedly talking amongst one another. I was about to ask where the other 20 students were, especially since you and Vlad are here together, and then remembered you expelled your entire class. Someone seems to have a pretty short-term memory. But yeah, my entire class is expelled. Didn't see an ounce of potential in them this year. But anyway, here's the lesson. We already have a plan, and you get to explain it to them," Shota replies, quickly handing Mikumo a packet that the man pulled out of nowhere. Now Mikumo can honestly see why his friends were spooked whenever he pulled out his own notebooks from seemingly nowhere. "Go ahead and go over it, and try to keep it quick. That way you can know what to say when I call you over." "All right," Mikumo replies, already starting to flip through the packet. It wasn't too big, and there was a basic rundown on the first page. The other two were just more detailed explanations about what was required, and how everyone was going to be graded. Luckily, Mikumo had gone over all of it in the short time he had before he was called over. Shota starting Mikumo's introduction as he walked over. The introduction definitely set it in stone that Shota felt that Mikumo wasn't exactly something the school needed, and was still pissed about earlier. "This is Mikumo Akatani, someone the commission sent in to help with your training, and further you into being better heroes. Yeah, he looks your age." "Rude," Mikumo mumbled, receiving a glare in return as Shota continues to speak. but I can guarantee that he's an adult. Shota then turns to Mikumo and says, "How old are you again?" 20. Reasonable enough excuse to look like all of you. He's still hardly an adult. You're just loving being an ass today, aren't you? You stole my seat this morning. Nezu encouraged it. As I've been told multiple times. But I still wanted my seat, and you didn't move. Fair enough. Are you two done bickering now? Sekijiro interrupts, crossing his arms as he glares at both underground pros. We still have a class to teach. Anyway, back to introducing him. Akatani here was someone who was specially trained by the commission, and they figured he'd be a perfect candidate to get some weight off of the rest of our shoulders by starting to take over teaching the hero training classes. Vlad and I will still be supervising for a while, and at least handing him some assignments to give you while he adjusts to the whole teaching thing. But he's going to be your main teacher in this class now. So, if you have any questions, annoy him, Shota finishes, and then turns to Mikumo, giving a slight jerk of his head to tell the younger pro that it was his turn. All right, good afternoon, everyone. As Aizawa here said, I'm Mikumo Akatani, and I'll be teaching this class. Based on what I've heard, you guys are the only ones here for a while, because someone expelled his entire homeroom, and now has nothing better to do. Why do we need 3 teachers here if it's only one homeroom class? One of the students asked, her head tilted to the side as she waits for the answer. Because I'm practically being babysat by Aizawa. Vlad is your homeroom teacher, and I'm teaching this class, Mikumo replies, lacing his fingers together behind his back as he gives the class a smile. Anyway, back onto the plan for today's training. You'll all be starting to split up in a specific way. If your seat number is an even number, find someone else who sits in a seat with an even number. And if your seat is an odd number, find someone else who sits in an odd-numbered seat. Everyone quickly starts shuffling around, each student's finding a partner to work with. Now that we're all split up, here's the lesson. With your numbers added together from least to greatest, that's going to factor who you're up against. So, the lowest numbered team is going to be going against the highest numbered team, and we're going to continue to go in that order, Mikumo explains, and watches as the kids begin to talk, adding up their numbers, Sekijiro doing the same. He was the only teacher here who knew the seat numbers of each student, and made sure Mikumo knew the order of the teams, and what to do with the teams that had the same number. Not too much later, they finally had the order for each team, and who they were up against. Mikumo excitedly began to explain what they were doing for that day's training, ignoring the students that were talking for the most part, but at least making sure to add in, and those who don't listen and end up failing the assignment today will not be given any other chances to fix the low grade. I can easily notice who's been listening, and who hasn't, you know? Just want you guys to know what you're doing. And then the lesson started. Both homeroom teachers watching the class and Mikumo, making sure the students were doing as they were supposed to, mentally taking note of the mistakes, and making sure Mikumo was noticing them too. Mikumo didn't exactly pride himself on his analytical skills for nothing, and so he was making sure to carefully take note of everything, and even writing notes on the backside of the paper on the packet, which was left completely blank. He did have to ask Sekijiro for the names of the students first though. At least, by the third match, Sekijiro just knew to hand over the names and let Mikumo start writing his notes. Soon enough, the training was over, each student being given a chance to analyze at least 3 others and try to figure out what was going wrong in each part of it. Mikumo spared yet another glance at the way Sekijiro and Shota wanted Mikumo to grade everyone, and took in a sharp intake of air as he scanned over his notes on each student's performance. None of them did very well in all honesty, and Mikumo had to keep reminding himself that these are still only first years who have barely stepped into their lessons, and weren't expected to fight for their lives every month. Even though the grading weights were relatively soft, turning to face all 20 of the students, he let a smile spread across his face once more, and after a quick, calming breath, he said, I'll be honest with you all, especially for the sake of Aizawa. But you all did horrible. So, I have a last-second way for you to earn 10 points back. Sir, we're only first years. Akatani-sensei, I don't want to judge the teaching methods of this school, but we've had hardly any training, and I'd say we did pretty well for hardly even being in this school, a student protested, stepping forward a little, their fingers clenched into a tight fist. Well, it's Aizawa's grading weight, not mine. Not to mention that I'm offering everyone a chance for redemption on their grades, Mikumo explains, the smile starting to fall off of his face a little, once more a blank expression as he explains the next assignment. I plan on emailing you all a document that will hold a link to each fight, and a list of everyone's names. Each of you will choose a classmate, and then you'll write me at least a paragraph of what the person you chose did wrong in their fight. I hope that, from an outsider's point of view, you can see the mistakes. And let me guess, you want full sentences that make sense, and are also just full sentences in general. Sir, you're not our language teacher. Present Mike is. And we've already got plenty of homework from him, another student explains, and it takes almost everything in Mikumo to not get mad with the tone alone. How do teachers even handle these kids? Well, yeah, I want that. But I'm sure every teacher expects full and clear sentences. The language teachers aren't the only people that can read, and would like to not be annoyed with every last sentence, Mikumo replies. But anyway, the list will be there so that only one person can choose someone. By the end of this, everyone should have at least a paragraph written by a peer on what they did wrong. If we want to keep arguing, though, I can add an extra paragraph where you explain what they could have done better. And then they were finally quiet. Akatani, a question I'm sure they all have. When is this assignment due? Sekijiro asks, giving his students a nervous look, and then quickly turning back to Mikumo with a soft smile, as if he was going to get his own homework. It's due tomorrow. UA is already known for holding itself up to high standards, and if they can't meet them, how are they supposed to be able to handle the demand of hero work? It's simple homework, and Mike honestly doesn't hand out anything too hard, Mikumo replies, leading to a whole bunch of groans and disappointment, and a lot of distraught faces. I mean, do you guys want me to put you through the lessons I had to go through? A hell of a lot harder than what Aizawa and Vlad are asking me to give you. No thank you, the class replies in sync, most of the students' faces turning into fake smiles, vigorously shaking their head from side to side, not even knowing what kind of lessons Mikumo was thinking of. The young pro may not actually know what commission lessons were like, but he could always ask Keigo, and even look back at the more difficult lessons he had from Shota, and the train of thought he had to put himself through when in the middle of a villain attack. Maybe even try to simulate a villain attack for them. I figured. Anyway, bell's about to ring. I might go ahead and get to work on thinking about your classmates' performance today, and who you may want to analyze. Give yourself a few options in case, if someone is finally picked by the time you open the email. Would you mind if we just emailed you a document in return for the assignment? That way we're not just wasting paper, a student asks. Mikumo shrugs, saying, yeah, go ahead and email it to me instead. And then the bell finally rings, announcing that it was finally time for the next class. The class honestly felt like it should not have taken up as much time as it did. Good job with them, I guess, Shota says, walking over to stand next to Mikumo, watching as Sekijiro walks off with his class, already mumbling to his students about how they should honestly start taking commission trained seriously, and honestly consider how strict the commission president is before they start making certain comments and complaints to Mikumo. Was he really that harsh? It was a simple homework assignment to fix their grade. Nothing too bad. Shota's bright yellow sleeping bag was already being lifted off of the ground, the older underground pro digging into the bag and grabbing a few more packets, handing them to Mikumo, and saying, you still have a few more classes today. Go ahead and use those packets for each one, and you're all on your own for the rest of the day. I need coffee and a nap. Once the man was out of earshot, Mikumo grinned and muttered "classic" under his breath, recalling all the times that the man had fallen asleep in class, simply because he wanted to. The rest of the day wasn't too hard, and he was actually having a lot more fun working with the second and third years, already much more familiar with what was expected, and having spent enough time with Shota to have a basic understanding of what was expected in the packets. Mikumo even said to the rest of the classes, "Honestly, I hate having to grade you based off of Aizawa's standards, but I'd rather him not try and get me fired before I've even really started. So, until Aizawa is done babysitting me, we're stuck on his grading methods." Yeah, everyone quickly seemed to be doing their best after that. The most amusing class was definitely 2B, which was the class Nejire was in, with Mirio and Tamaki in the other second-year course. It was honestly hard to have her stop with the constant questions, and Mikumo even tried to answer as many as possible, all while still trying to focus on how everyone was doing in each lesson. The most quiet Mikumo got that class period was when it was Nejire's turn. By the time the last class was over, Mikumo was already ready to go home, but quickly found himself stopped by Nezu and Lunch Rush, not even letting the younger staff member leave the camera room in the training facility, which he had used to supervise each lesson that required a duel, which was most of them. "Akatani, hello. Just wanted to make sure your first day went well," Nezu exclaims, sitting on the cooking hero's shoulder. "Oh, yeah, went as well as it could. Slight difficulty with the first years, but it's all fine," Mikumo replies, giving both Lunch Rush and Nezu a smile. "I also noticed you didn't get lunch today, and neither did Aizawa. We made sure to get him something to eat already, and assumes you would like something too. We don't exactly know what your favorite meal is, but I went ahead and made you some curry," Lunch Rush tells Mikumo, handing over a still steaming bowl to the younger hero. "Oh, thank you," Mikumo replies, his smile growing wider as he looks at the meal, happy that he was being offered it in the first place. But the smile quickly fell as he further processed just at what it was that he was offered. He's not sure why it started to hurt as bad as it did. Didn't even smell spicy, like Katsuki always preferred it to be. "I'm sorry, just a bit of a habit of mine to forget a meal or two. I'll do my best to keep myself and Aizawa reminded about lunch. It's fine. Just trying to make sure you take care of yourself. That way you don't land yourself in Recovery Girl's office. She's never happy to see staff members in there, especially since we're supposed to be holding this high example. If you also need breakfast, feel free to just let me know," Lunch Rush offers, and Mikumo just gives the man a small nod. "I'll let you know it I ever need any. Also, about the bowl. I'd prefer if you went ahead and ate on grounds, and returned the bowl to me when you finish. But if you've got somewhere you really need to be, just be careful with it, and return it tomorrow." "Ah, okay. Might forget. So I'll just go ahead and eat." With that, Nezu and Lunch Rush walk off, leaving Mikumo in the room by himself. The young pro spared a glance towards the cameras, looking to see if he could spot anything weird on them, like maybe a student lingering behind, maybe even a villain who somehow snuck in. Sure, Yua had great security, but after Tamira snuck in without detection, can you really blame him for wanting to check anyways? He decides to just sit on the ground, quickly eating the curry that was made for him, and even deciding to check his phone for notifications, making sure to keep a close eye on the time. Naturally, he forgot to tell everyone about starting work at UA today, and his phone was practically blown up with notifications from everyone. For there only being 7 people in the group chat, including himself, the amount of messages was pretty impressive. He had messages from the group chat, and Endemus. A little funny to be honest. Deciding to save time, he just goes to reply in the group chat. "Thisbitch finally replied. Good afternoon. Thisbitch finally replied. WTH happened to my name. Eurovideo 3. To make sure we all knew to run to our phones and greet you. Thank you for finally replying. Thisbitch finally replied changed their name to Imgoing Tascream. Imgoing Tascream. I am very busy. Piliofrox. With what? Finally catching up on your sleep schedule. Frogpocalypse. Tape dispenser. XT. Piliofrox. Holy Tsu just agreed with me, man. You better be getting your rest, dude. Teniida. It would be very reassuring to know that you've gotten rest, Midoriya. We've been worrying about you. Even if your rest took up the entirety of the morning and a few hours into the afternoon, we'll be happy to know you got some rest. I'm going to scream. Nah. I'm going to scream. No rest for me. Teniida. Midoriya. What have you been doing instead of getting your well-deserved rest? Please don't tell me you're stressing over stopping Shigaraki and all for one. Midoriya sucks. What Ida said. We're going to worry for you, Midoriya. You're a video 3. 8 formal typers. Move over. My turn to better express worry. But in a fun way, D. Frogpocalypse. You have fun with that. I just want to know what Midoriya's been up to instead of sleeping. You're a video 3. Fair enough. You're a video 3. I suppose the formal typers have said they're due XT. I'm going to scream. I've been teaching. I have a Julu. I'm also going to be teaching you guys next school year, D. Piliofrox. What? Tape dispenser. Cast Jules what? I'm going to scream. Anyone, Rossi. I have to go. Gotta talk to him. And then try and throw some of my wisdom at my younger self. T-tile. I'm going to scream. W. Sidmo. I'm going to scream. Wisdom. I'm going to scream. I'm going to F King scream. Frogpocalypse. First off, we're definitely doing a group call tonight. Second off, scream. It'll match your group chat nickname perfectly. And then Mikumo turned off his phone, going yet another day with not telling his friends to call him Akatani. This is what he gets for causing some minor chaos every time he opens the chat. If he slips up with the whole name thing, he's just going to blame his friends, and partially himself. He'd feel bad if he only blamed them. Mikumo stuffs his phone into his pocket, and then carefully picks up the empty bowl, deciding to go to the cafeteria real quick, drop off the bowl, and then run to the beach. Once he arrived in the cafeteria, Lunch Rush was still there, cleaning up a little bit, and grabbing all of the dishes that were left behind by the students. Gratefully, it wasn't much, but Mikumo still felt a little bad watching him pick it all up on his own. So he helped around a little, grabbing some of the dishes and carrying them into the large kitchen that Lunch Rush had to himself. Mikumo hadn't exactly been back here before, and he thought it was pretty cool and seemed pretty cozy. Sink is just over here, Lunch Rush says, walking up from behind Mikumo and over to the sink. Mikumo quickly followed after, placing the dishes in the sink alongside all of the dishes Lunch Rush brought in. The young pro's bowl was already placed in the stack as he picked up the other dishes, so now he had successfully returned the bowl. Thanks for the help, but didn't you have a place to go to? Yeah, but I figured he wouldn't mind waiting for a few extra minutes. I just have to run a little bit faster than usual to get there. Maybe take a few shortcuts through the alleyways. Mikumo replies as he starts to make his way out of the kitchen. Commission didn't give you a car? Nah. Might get one soon though. But I'm more prioritizing getting out of my room in the commission building. They said I can move out by my first paycheck, so I'm just waiting for that. You're 20, and they're only just now starting to let you get out of the building. Yeah, sucks, but it's about time. They're just finally done watching over me for a while. Decided I was responsible enough to be trusted in my own place. They've already said that they're going to get me this one place, but want me to wait until my first paycheck. That way I can still get food and decorate my home a little. Ah, I see. I wish you luck, Akatani. Thank you. Mikumo gives the pro a wide smile, finally starting to walk out of the kitchen area. But until you get a car, and because US staff's schedule can be hectic, I'm driving you to that place you need to get to until you get one. Come on. And that was how Mikumo ended up in the passenger seat of Lunch Rush's car. sitting there in an awkward silence, other than the occasional direction that Mikumo had to give the other pro, who wasn't all that used to going to Dagaba Beach. Hardly anyone went there anyway, so Mikumo can't blame him. Too much trash there right now. So why are you meeting up with someone at Dagaba Beach of all places? It's pretty dangerous there, especially with all of the trash tossed onto that beach. Large stuff washed up too because of the currents. Lunch rush questions. Just working with someone to get the beach cleaned up. We heard it was really pretty. Well, I heard it was really pretty. The person I'm cleaning the beach up with saw it when there wasn't much trash at all. And now we want to fix it up. Give a nice spot to relax to the public again. That's nice. Definitely something I'm willing to drive you here relatively often for. I would personally like to see the beach become beautiful again. And I may even get to see bits and pieces of your progress every time I drop you off. Yeah, definitely going to take us a while though, because we've got someone who asked to help too, especially to work with training. They're trying to build up some muscle mass relatively quickly, and the person I'm working with said that the beach is the best bet. Ah, makes sense. Well, here we are. Go ahead and have fun getting that beach clean. And don't forget to let me know when it's done, because I've got to stop by and enjoy some time here myself. Lunch rush requests as he parks the car, letting Mikumo hop out. Yeah, I'll let you know. Thanks for the ride, Mikumo replies, giving a quick smile and wave as he turns to run off, quickly making his way to the trash, and then maneuvering through the piles of garbage, trying to make his way to the shore, where Izuku and Toshinori said they'd be. Mikumo knew he was much closer to being on time than he had planned on being, and it felt great to not be 20 minutes late, like how he was already predicting it was going to be like not too much earlier. But Lunch Rush is a very kind-hearted person, and so the man driving him over instead was such a sweet offer. He was only a few minutes late because of the help, and that meant that Toshinori and Izuku didn't have to wait for long. Ah, there you are, Toshinori exclaimed, arms held out wide, a smile spreading almost from ear to ear. Izuku turned around to see Mikumo running up, and gave his own soft smile, waving as Mikumo ran over. Sorry for being late. I got caught up with some work, Mikumo explains, giving both of them a smile of his own, nervously rubbing the back of his neck. I understand that. But you're here now. I'm hoping to get young Midoriya started up with the beach cleaning already. And you can maybe help him learn a little bit afterwards, as long as he isn't too tired, Toshinori suggests, and Mikumo shrugs, saying, if he does end up getting too tired, he'll already have a little more knowledge with the quirk, especially since I already went over it with him a bit this weekend. We kinda ran into each other at this small store. Yep, Izuku exclaims, giving both of his mentors a smile. Now, time to get you started, Toshinori says, proudly placing his hands on his waist, Izuku's shoulders slumping in response as he looks at all the trash around them. The training started relatively easy, as Mikumo remembered it being. Izuku was dragging some of the largest objects as far as he could through the sand, having to try and pull it instead of pushing it, like he probably wanted to. It was just this little cubby shelf though, so it wasn't like it weighed too much. The entire time they stood out there, Mikumo wanted to help Izuku so bad, but knew that doing so would hinder the kid's progress. Best to avoid that. Once Izuku was done with his training, he was honestly too tuckered out to really learn much of anything, and both Toshinori and Mikumo told him to get home with the last of the energy he had, and to go eat dinner, and then get rest. It was already getting pretty late anyways. When Mina and Denki passed, Izuku honestly wasn't expecting people to go after him again, especially because of the disaster that followed any time someone tried to stay near him. He just wanted to keep everyone safe, which he had screamed at them before, but nobody seemed to understand. They still dragged him back to school a couple months ago, made sure he rested up a little, ate some more food, and then he left again. The citizens were already on edge in the time he was there, fearful of the danger that followed him. and how he was practically a trouble magnet all in itself. Izuku just wanted people to listen to him on that for once. Think the way the citizens did about him. It had been keeping them safe to try and get Izuku out of the school as quickly as possible. So why wouldn't his friends and mentors listen? He had been sitting in this run-down building, still mourning the deaths of Mina, Denki, and Toshinori, when he suddenly got a visitor. He was so tired of everyone somehow finding him, trying to comfort him, cheer him up, bring him back to the school. It showed that they cared for him, but at what cost? Couldn't they prioritize their own lives for once? It was Shota Aizawa who came to bring Izuku home that time, a slight limp in one leg because of his new prosthetic leg. Of all people that really shouldn't be out here, it's definitely Shota. And it honestly left Izuku to wonder what strings the man had to pull to get himself out of the school building. "There you are," Shota says as he walks into the building, voice soft and caring. It was the first time he'd heard a voice like that in a while, and he wanted to run up and hug the man so bad, yearn for the comfort and warmth of a hug from the man. But it was his predecessors that warned him otherwise, and placing his hands on Izuku's shoulders and saying, "Just stay put. I have a feeling it might be safer for you. Please, just go back to the school. It'll be safer for you," Izuku tells the teacher, trying to listen to En's warning, and backing up further into the building. It was the backing up that started to bring the familiar sense of danger sense to the back of Izuku's head, and he quickly stopped, turning to look behind him, hand knocking over an empty soda can. It clattered against the ground, loud in the practically empty, large room. And then there was a loud screech, horrifying and dangerous. Izuku couldn't help his yelp of surprise, and hardly even stayed to face in that direction, turning to look at his homeroom teacher running forward, panic etched into every detail of his expression, desperately trying to get to Izuku. When would people stop sacrificing themselves for his sake? Sure, that felt a little hypocritical, but Izuku could honestly only handle so much. A large Namu emerged from the shadows, a loud whir coming from where its knees should be. Chainsaw knees? That doesn't sound fun. But Shota seemed to move before he could think, somehow managing to get to Izuku quickly, and then pushing the boy as far out of the way as he could, meeting his end as the Namu kneed the man in the gut, and made its quick retreat, blood splattering all over the room, and all over Izuku. It was the one for all predecessors that had to try and drag him out of there, away from the only father figure he really felt like he had left. It wasn't fair. Mikumo woke up from the nightmare the next morning, staying there on his bed, content to stay under the covers for as long as he could, his alarm to get ready not even blaring for the first time yet. While he had gone through that dream multiple times before, it finally got him thinking. Should he finally take the time to contact the one for all holders that came before him and open that mind space again? Would he really be willing to face his Toshinori again? Mikumo quickly grabbed his phone, checking the time, and squinting from the sudden brightness of the screen. It took him a moment to actually be able to look at the screen, but once he managed, he put his phone back on the nightstand and rolled back to facing the wall. 4 in the morning. He still had plenty of time. Mikumo had been blocking out the former holders of One for All for so long, never really paying them much of any attention, and somehow making them disappear one day. Maybe they did it on their own, but they definitely hadn't been trying to contact him since. How does he even talk to them again? He had unlocked so much with One for All in such a short amount of time, but generally knew how he did it, or was told what to do to trigger what it was by the predecessors, like they did with him unlocking their quirks. But them talking to him was something that just happened after the battle against Tamura. But the big question of the day was if the predecessors even wanted to talk to him at this point. He wouldn't blame them if they ignored him for a while, especially since he simply pretended they weren't even there for a whole week and a half before they actually disappeared. He had 2.5 hours to figure it all out though. And so what if he was actually feeling lonely enough to talk to dead people? The call he had earlier was nice, But the moment he hung up with his friends, he felt more lonely than he did before, especially knowing he'd probably never get those group hugs again, or getting to be around his friends total, when they'd worriedly check on each other after something like a fight, and take care of one another if needed. That had always been how he and his classmates were with each other, and he wouldn't trade it for the world. He just wanted to be in their company again. Mikumo buried himself deeper into his covers, pulling them over his head, surrounding himself in even more darkness. Maybe there was some visual he had to place into his head to see them again. One for All was a pretty weird quirk after all, and it required a lot of different things to activate certain abilities and aspects of it. He honestly wouldn't be surprised if it just ended up being really simple, and he was overthinking things again. He tried to start relatively simple, imagining seeing the predecessors again, trying to place himself back in the floating, destroyed room, 8 seats placed into a half circle, all of those who came before him either sitting or standing in that half circle, giving him advice, trying to remind him of certain things he had to do. It felt nice to have people worry over him like they did, especially when he was trying to avoid all living people. He never had to worry about them dying since they were already dead, and hoped to be able to stay with them one day. But maybe they'd all finally pass on once the line of One for All came to a stop, and the last holder dies with it. In all honesty, Mikumo was probably going to be the last holder of the quirk, unsure of if he'd be able to pass the quirk on to another quirkless person, and let them continue to live a full life, without the risk of it being drastically shortened from the powerful quirk. The quirkless population was going down pretty quickly, which meant the chances of finding one were only going to continue to decrease. Melissa is actually the only person Mikumo can recall meeting who still doesn't have a quirk. Toshinori was, of course, born quirkless, but he was also older, and there were more quirkless people in his generation, and he was given a quirk by Nana during his teenage years. No, wrong train of thought right now. He has to focus on seeing his predecessors again. With a sigh, he goes back to what he was originally trying to do, desperately trying to see the other 8 One for All holders. They were able to hug him, somewhat physically be there, smack him if needed. It wouldn't be the first time someone tried to smack some sense into him. "Hey, kiddo. You look different," Nana says, her voice soft and sweet, like it had always been towards Mikumo. He happily turned to look at the previous One for All holders, practically smiling from ear to ear when he got to see all 8 of them. They were smiling right back at him, which was a very different reaction from what he was expecting from them. Nana held her arms out wide, head slightly tilting to the side, ready to give the younger One for All holder a hug, which he happily ran into, tears already starting to well up in his eyes as he wrapped his arms around the woman. "Young Midoriya," Toshinori says, smiling as he walks over, wrapping his long arms around both Nana and Mikumo, eventually deciding to ruffle Mikumo's hair as they eventually let go of the hug. "What made you decide to talk to us again?" Yoichi asks, sliding off of his seat and then onto his feet, placing his hands behind his back as he gave the 9th One for All holder a small smile. "I was starting to feel a little lonely. Commission sent me back in time to try and fix things, and they've only got me here. Sure, my phone still works and lets me text and call everyone, but it just..." Mikumo starts to explain, pausing just long enough for Degoro to finish the sentence, saying, "Still doesn't help, and you still feel pretty lonely." Mikumo nods, and Toshinori pulls Mikumo into another hug. Just a one-armed one this time, giving him a small shake as he says, "So, you seem like you're stepping in a good deal if you need to disguise yourself. Want to tell us what you're doing?" And so he does, excitedly starting to talk about what's been going on so far, and the home he was planning on getting soon. He excitedly talked about what he had planned for the future, and how to fix everything, and especially enjoyed talking about the job he took up as a member of the US staff, teaching the heroics classes. He did get out a quick rant about the first year's behavior, and how he was relatively surprised they were still there. But then Toshinori said, Remember how your class was when they first got into the school? These kids also don't have any near-death experiences going on right now. I know. But they're going to go through a lot of those if they really continue along the hero path. I'm really starting to get why Aizawa always tried to train us so hard now. He just wanted what's best for us, Mikumo replies. That is true, Nana starts, grinning as she slightly shakes her head. Teaching is definitely a tough job, and sometimes we know we're doing it right if the kiddos are a little frustrated with it. But there's definitely that obvious point of bad teacher, and teacher who's just worried for his kid's future. Try not to be the bad teacher in all of this. You're honestly teaching more people than anyone here ever has, Hickage pipes in, shrugging, and then adding, yes, even you, Toshi. You only really focused on Midoriya's class anyway, and he's going to be teaching for a lot more years than you. You only got to teach 1 year, and then the school year stopped. You didn't even get to the end, when Toshinori looked at the fourth one for all holder with a slightly offended face. If you want to let us hang around again, we can try to help you a bit. We won't be able to do too much, especially since nobody else can see us, and we can't really interact with anything other than you. So, yeah, Nana suggests, giving the youngest successor a sheepish smile. Mikumo smiles and says, I would love it if you guys would hang around again. About time. I was getting bored, Degoro says, resulting in a quick smack to the back of the head from En. The bald man turns to glare at the fifth successor, mouthing something that made En gasp, and hit the other hero once more. Degoro bursts into laughter, and Nana shakes her head, placing her hands on her hips as she once more turns to Mikumo, and says, Hey, Mid-Akatani. Mikumo had been sure to tell everyone about the name change earlier. If you don't mind, would you mind telling us who all is left in your class? You sort of started blocking us out after Aizawa. Just me, Shiro, Kirishima, Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, and Asui, Mikumo replies. Ah, I'm sorry, kiddo. Nana gives him a sympathetic look, and the others seem to as well. A few were trying to hide it though, probably worried about how Mikumo would respond to all of the gloomy faces. And then there was a loud knock that interrupted the peace of the headspace, making most of them jump. Mikumo's eyes widened as he heard, Akatani, get up. You're going to be late. Your train is in 10 minutes. Ah, shit, Mikumo says, his voice panicked and hushed down to a whisper. He quickly pulled himself out of the mindscape and immediately jumps off his bed, rushing over to his closet and slipping on the outfit, quickly putting on the makeup over his freckles, and almost forgetting the colored contacts. The commission president is already waiting at the door, impatiently tapping her foot, arms crossed as she says, You slept in, didn't you? Yeah. You have 2 minutes before that train leaves, and there's no way you're getting on it on time, she says, her voice in a scolding tone before she presents something in the hand that was tucked behind her arm, revealing a key. You're going to get to drive one of the cars today, but next time, don't be late. There's a garage on the first floor. Just go left, turn right on the second hallway, and then 3 doors down on the right. It should be the only white car in there, especially since nobody parks in there anyways. It's only for the spare cars, and most of the others are taken. Now get going. Thank you, Mikumo quickly replies, running past her and out of the room. It was as he was running that he hears the woman call after him, saying, And button those buttons, you hear me? He did, but decided to ignore her. It was fun. He successfully managed to find the garage, Toshinori already by his side, sitting in the passenger seat after phasing through the door. All right, second day on the job. Let's go, young Midor Akatani. Toshinori makes sure he quickly corrects himself, patting the younger hero on the shoulder, and watching as the boy gets the car turned on, and quickly gets everything adjusted. I'm about to drive on 3 weeks of practice, but absolutely nobody needs to know that. They already gave me a license anyway, and I did pretty damn well, Mikumo mutters to himself, resulting in a fearful look from Toshinori. What? I said I've been doing a pretty damn good driving. I'm not planning on crashing and joining you guys in the afterlife, okay? Toshinori just nods, reaching for the seatbelt, successfully forgetting that it doesn't actually work for him. Mikumo would honestly burst into laughter if he wasn't so focused on remembering every last thing he had learned from his mother and Shota. He could do this. He eventually made it out of the garage and successfully got to UA, somehow managing to follow every rule of the road and not slipping up once. He couldn't help but mentally give himself a pat on the back and toss his arms into the air when he managed to correctly park in the UA parking lot. Toshinori cheered for him too. Mikumo quickly started running down the halls, dodging the students, greeting a few that he knew, but keeping it brief. He quickly got to the meeting room, quickly finding Nezu, and giving the principal a quick wave. The principal smiles, saying, "I expected to see you here this morning." "Well, I don't have many other places to go," Mikumo replies, giving Nezu a quick smile. "Ah, so, on the school site, with all of the contact teacher information, I did get you an email set up. Feel free to change it as you want, but do try to keep the email username the same. That way I don't have to go mess with the school site. Also, based on what you assigned the first years, you should hopefully already have 20 emails," Nezu explains, handing Mikumo a sticky note, the username and password written on it. "Thank you," Mikumo replies. "And one final thing. I got you an office, just as the rest of the teachers do. That way you'll have somewhere to be in the morning, and students will be able to find you." "Thank you." "Of course. Now, care for some tea?" "Oh, sure. I honestly kept forgetting I had an office," Toshinori mutters, looking down at the ground as he awkwardly stuffs his hands into his pockets. Mikumo rolls his eyes at Toshinori's words, grinning before turning his attention back to the principal, watching as he pours tea into a couple cups. Once Nezu was done, he places a cup in the seat Shota had to sit in yesterday, gesturing for Mikumo to take a seat before walking to his own seat. "I don't generally sit in here, especially since this room is for meetings, and generally sit in the teacher's lounge on the first year's floor. But since I haven't exactly given you a proper tour around the school, I figured I'd be able to find you here," Nezu explains, taking a quick sip of his tea before finally facing the young pro, and says, "But I would like to know a little more on what you plan on doing today with your students. You see, Shota got caught up in a mission today and won't be able to return. I can always have the class homeroom teacher help, but I'm afraid they can only do so much, especially since they were promised heroics class as a planning period for the rest of the year. And time you're here, they might be a little grumpy." "That makes sense," Mikumo replies, taking a sip of his own tea. "I honestly don't have any plans yet, especially since yesterday Shota handed me a packet for each class and told me that that's what I was doing. If there was one thing you'd want to do today, what would it be?" Mikumo sat there, thinking it over for a bit, mentally going through the ideas he had for the classes. And then he finally got an idea, quickly turning back to Nezu and saying, "I want to get to know the students and get to know their quirks. All the other teachers have gotten to know them a little longer than me, and I still don't have a clue. It would be nice to get to understand their quirks and personality a little better, get to understand what their limit is, and just how much training they need." There you go. Sounds like that's what the lesson is then. Figure out their limitations. I'd expect nothing better from the commissioned children. Nezu claps his paws together, smiling before saying, "Now let's get this tour over with." The tour ended in Mikumo's new office, which only really had the basic stuff that you'd expect to see in a teacher's office. A desk, a few chairs, one for the teacher, and a couple for any others who wanted or needed to sit there. There was also an empty bookshelf and a filing cabinet next to each other, sitting across from the desk. The room could use a lot of work. The curtains did at least block out a lot of light though. "What do you think?" Nezu asks, cheer still seeping through every word he spoke. "I think It could use a lot of work. Seems a little bland at the moment, Mikumo replies, knowing it would be best to be completely honest with the principal. The man was too smart to ignore a lie, and could always spot one. I understand that. You can decorate it however you like, as long as you keep things appropriate. I did have to correct some of Midnight's things before, but I trust that you can keep this a place where the students can safely walk in if needed. Of course. Well, I'll be on my way now. Keep an eye on the time, and you should hopefully know your way to the training grounds when it's time to teach. Also, you have a laptop in the first drawer on the left side of the desk. It should be completely charged at the moment, and do have fun going through that homework you assigned the kids. Do let me know if you need anything, Nezu explains as he begins to walk out the door, suddenly stopping, and then saying, don't be shy to wear your hero suit if you want. The commission president did drop it off this morning, telling me you'd probably be in too much of a rush to stop by her office and get it. The case should be under your desk. Thanks. Anytime. Farewell, and I hope to see you later. 8. Enjoy your principal stuff, I guess. Nezu laughs as he walks out the door, silently shutting it behind him as he finally leaves. Principal stuff? Really? Nana asks, giggling behind Mikumo. The living hero smiles himself, crossing his arms as he says, I still have no clue what to say to the guy. Never talked to me before, and he honestly scares me. I completely understand that. He just randomly pops up for conversation, and it always feels so awkward. He may be adorable and all, but he still feels so intimidating, Toshinori says, shuddering, his hands flying to the opposing elbow. Toshie, don't be all scared of the guy. You're going to give your successor a bad example. You already scared him enough with Gran, Nana says, ruffling her successor's hair, but having to float to do so. He was still much taller in comparison to her, after all. I suppose I did, but Gran Torino already treated young Midoriya. Akatani. Yes, young Akatani, much better than me. He said it was something about how I had more muscle, and only needed toughening up on a fighting style than I did with figuring out how to mold the quirk to work with my body. I swear, All Might, you're going to be the reason I slip up one day, Mikmo jokes, grabbing the laptop out of the desk drawer that Nezu described, placing the device on his desk. He sits in the spinning chair, spinning around in it a few times, trying to get ideas for the room, muttering, this room really could use a lot more decorations. And maybe thinner curtains, 'cause your room has hardly any light in it, Nana says, walking over to said curtains and letting her head phase through them, trying to look at what was just outside the window. It's a pretty view out here too. Wouldn't hurt you to open them. I think the curtains are going to stay. It's more of a comforting dark instead of a scary dark, you know? Mikumo tries to explain, shrugging as he turns on the laptop, giving everything a second to load, and then immediately going to his email. He quickly counted how many had been submitted, and sighed when he only saw 13 submissions. At least the names all looked familiar, meaning that he could easily identify who had submitted the assignment instead of asking for who named themselves something completely different. Glad he knew who the homeroom teacher was, he quickly went to email Sekijiro, asking about possibly receiving the class roster, especially since it hadn't been handed to him by Shota just yesterday. And that way Mikumo could really check to make sure who had submitted things and who hadn't. It was as Nana and Izuku were going through the emails, finally getting to the 7th one, that he finally got an email back from Sekijiro. vladking@gmail.com. Good morning, Akatani. Yes, I can get you the roster, and the link will be down below. I don't know why Eraserhead didn't give it to you yesterday, but I can assure you that he was probably prioritizing his nap over everything else yesterday. Although, I have come to question how you hacked into my email, because you didn't have access to this yesterday, and I got a few complaints from my students about the assignment, on an email that I do not recall sending. And since it was your assignment, I can only assume that you are the one who sent it. So, How exactly did you get into my email? Mikumo made sure to quickly send his reply, talking about how Sekijiro seemed like a pretty basic guy when it came to passwords, and that having his birthday as a password was just really easy to figure out. He also brought up how he didn't exactly have an email to message the students with, and so sending the students their homework through the first-year homeroom teacher's email was necessary. He also had to explain how he somehow managed to get all the right students without the class roster. He was using the packet from Shota to get their names. Why was he surprised about seeing them with the names they were supposed to have again? All right, we got the reply. Now let's get back to grading, Nana says, quickly grabbing Mikumo's hand and making him grab the mouse and click on the last student submission that they were looking at, returning to grading the student's paragraph. I never had to do this when I was teaching, Toshinori says, grimacing at the emails Mikumo had gotten from the students, and how Mikumo was going between the packet and his laptop, changing up the grades a little with each email he went through, deciding just how many redemption points each paragraph gave. And lucky for the young pro, Shota had told him just how to put the grades in on the last page, right at the very bottom, in a much smaller font than everything else. How nice of him to leave it there, Nana says, her tone filled with sarcasm as she leans close to the paper, telling Mikumo what it said, and telling him to write it down so he doesn't strain his eyes having to look at it later. She was honestly acting a little like a parent, but Mikumo didn't mind too much. Toshinori was just standing there, a little clueless to just what it was that the two were doing. And Mikumo closes out of the email tab, spinning in his chair once the laptop was closed, and says, "We're done. Took us long enough." "You did well though, kiddo," Nana says, grinning as she softly claps her hands together in congratulation. "Right on time for lunch too." Mikumo glances at the clock above his door, quickly getting off his chair, saying, "Aw shit, I don't want to not be there for lunch again. Already missed it yesterday. Yeah, let's not skip it today. Don't want to be the grumpy teacher, simply because you're hungry," Nana says, quickly walking alongside Mikumo. They managed to get there just a couple minutes before the students were going to arrive, and Lunch Rush quickly managed to hand the younger pro some katsudon, both waving to each other as Mikumo walked back off to his office with a smile. He sat there in his office, deciding to sit on the floor this time, quietly eating his lunch while all the predecessors made their appearance, excitedly talking amongst one another, and even getting Mikumo to pipe in a few times. They were enjoying their time there overall, and Mikumo wouldn't trade it for the world. He just enjoyed having people around him. 10 minutes left of lunch, and his phone started ringing, which was pretty off. His friends knew he was working as a teacher now, and they were on the same time frame. So maybe they just knew it was lunch, forgot about the job, or accidentally called. But it was none of them. There, plain as day, was his mother's contact, waiting for him to pick up the phone. The one for all predecessors went quiet, Toshinori encouraging Mikumo to answer the phone, Dagoro even grabbing his thumb and making him answer. He quickly brought the phone to his ear, saying, "Ma? Izuku, dear? I'm so happy you answered. I haven't heard from you in so long, and I was starting to get really worried about you." "Iri too," Inko starts to explain, speaking quickly, her excitement practically pouring through the phone. Mikumo just let her speak, placing his chin on his knees, which he had curled up close against his chest, smiling as he listened to her. "But, oh, Iri has been making some of the most wonderful drawings lately, and she lets me talk about how you used to draw all the time at her age. She happily listens too. And then we hang up her drawings in her room. The apartment is really quiet, and far too big for just the two of us. But it's safe here, and we're doing well. What about you, Izuku dear? What are you doing other than adjusting to a new life in that timeline?" "Oh, I wasn't actually expecting the commission to tell you about it. But I got to start teaching, and today's my second day with it. I actually managed to get a job at UA, and the commission is really helping me right now. I'll actually be able to get a place of my own once I get my first paycheck. And I'm really excited for that. I'm also talking to the previous one for all holders again. And it's making it a lot less lonely here, Mikumo explains, taking in the smiles that everyone around him was providing. So, what's the disguise like? What new name have you given yourself? Inko asks, her voice suddenly dropping into a much quieter tone as she seems to talk to someone else, saying, "Yes, it's Izuku. Don't worry, I'll let you talk to him soon enough. Not too much different. Finally cut my hair again, dyed it black, hiding the freckles, and wearing colored contacts every day," Mikumo explains to her, adding, "Also decided to use the name that you told me Dad wanted. The last name was difficult though, but I managed to get it." "What did you come up with then?" Mikumo Akatani. "It sounds wonderful. I bet you're going to do wonderful. What are things like out there for you, Mom?" "Well, like I said, quiet. But I have heard that the amount of villains hunting around lately has started to go down now that you've disappeared. Meaning they're probably just trying to look in more discreet places for you. Not seeing you out in the open is probably frustrating them. And, Izuku dear, I don't want you to think everything has gotten so much better just because you're gone. The Nomas are still going wild and lurking around the streets. And the last pro-heroes we have right now are doing their best and are even letting some citizens help after some quick quirk training. They're hoping that in the confusion of you missing, they can fix this, and we can be free to live normal lives again." Makumo's smile had fallen by the time she was done speaking, and he says, "I don't see much of the point of me being here if it's going to mean that nothing is fixed for you guys. Kinda just feels like I was shoved here to be tested or something. I mean, everyone is saying that the commission has been spoiling me back in that timeline, but I don't see why they would just get rid of me like that. Maybe for more training, and so you can maybe figure out things you didn't know before. If you somehow manage to come back, you'll know a lot more and can help us better." They were also probably not too sure about how the quirk that sent you back in time worked. Those quirks do tend to be illegal for use, so I can understand them not knowing much about it. I'll try and find some way back there, I promise. This timeline still has time travel as illegal, so going back to the same lady probably won't work. But I can maybe find someone else with a permanent time travel quirk and can get me back home. Hey, no. I just want you to be safe. It was something the commission agreed on doing, and I don't think they'll be happy to see you come back, especially if it's just because you'd feel more comfortable here. You also haven't gotten to do too much there yet, and I'm sure that maybe some changes can be made when you really start to step in. I guess. Just stay safe out there, okay? Yeah, I will. But you make sure you're happy there, got it? Try and become friends with the staff, or find other people to be friends with. Sure, they're probably never going to give as much joy and comfort as your friends here do. But it's always worth a shot, especially so you don't end up feeling too lonely. You're my little boy, and always have been, no matter how big you get. As long as you're happy, I'll be doing wonderfully." "All right," Mikumo replies, and then glances at the clock, saying, "I've got to go now. But do tell Eri that I'll call again in a few hours to talk to her, please. I've got some classes to teach." "Alrighty. Have fun, and I love you." "Love you too, Mom. Stay safe, and bye." "Bye-bye." Yoichi places his hand on Mikumo's shoulder as he lifts himself off the ground, empty bowl in hand. The first holder of one for all gives the ninth holder a smile, which was quickly returned. Once Mikumo placed the bowl on his desk, planning on bringing it to the cafeteria later, he rushed down to where the first years should be meeting at for today's training, ready to start class again. When Mikumo walks up to the 20 remaining first years, they're all still talking amongst each other, excitedly talking about a whole bunch of different subjects. It was nice to see people just carelessly talking like this, and not having to be worried about speaking in a hushed tone. He wanted to bring his friends here to see it. "Good afternoon," Mikumo says to them. keeping his voice just loud enough that they would be able to hear him, and to get their attention drawn to him. Most of them mumbled a greeting in return, and a couple turned to face the young pro, waiting to be able to hear what their lesson was on. "Sir, are we going to talk about the sports festival today? It is next week, and Vlad King said that we need to go to you about it, especially since he's too tired to do it today," one of the students explained, their hands slightly raised in the air as they speak. "Just figured that since you're now our hero training teacher, you'd be getting us prepared for it." That's what made Mikumo stop for a second, quickly pulling out his phone and checking the date, eyebrows furrowed as he does so. Was it already that close to that time? He hadn't seen a sports festival in years, so the fact that there was going to be a sports festival completely flew over his head. "Holy shit, there is one soon," Mikumo says, his voice low as his eyes widen, quickly putting his phone back into his pocket before he says, "I was actually not informed about anything we're doing for the festival just yet, but I can definitely try to get some training in. So, either I'm being left in the dark on a decision that was already previously made, or there simply hasn't been a conversation about it yet. Unless Nezu decides these on his own. But I don't think he does that. So we're going to try to prepare for it though, right?" the same kid asks. Mikumo simply shrugs and says, "I mean, yeah, you guys are all expected to train, even after school hours. I can't tell you what the tests were, even if I knew them. Just make sure you study what the other first years are like, especially since those are who you're going against. You may be the only hero course students, but don't forget that you generally have to compete against each other as well. You're equal competition for one another. And then you still have to go against the other courses. You may think that they're not as good as you since they're not in the hero course, but each and every last one of them will have a trick up their sleeve. You have to keep an eye out for them." "What kind of training are we going to have to do?" another student asks, looking a little worried about just how hard Mikumo was expecting them to train, and cringing ever since Mikumo said they'd even need to try and train after school. "Well, for starters, quirk training. I do need to get to know your quirks better anyway, so today's a great day to work on it. Let's try and find out your quirk limits today, and then tomorrow, a bit more on your total strengths. There will be plenty of instances where most of you can't even use your quirk, and that's something I'm sure of. I've seen it with plenty of heroes." And so they start their training, Mikumo already taking notes on all of them, his pen quickly moving across each page, the simplest of doodles drawn in the corner. He could always add more detail over time. The main focus was the notes on their quirk anyway, and just how much further Mikumo knew he could get the quirks to go. The students went through the lesson without a care in the world about what notes their teacher was taking, too excited to get to be using their abilities and show them off to their classmates. "I did say to try and get your quirk to its limit today, didn't I? Doesn't this school have the whole plus ultra motto? All of you seem far too relaxed to not be going to your limits," Mikumo tells them all, which leads to all conversation coming to a quick stop as they focus on putting more power into what they were doing. "You're really not kidding with the first years this year are really slacking off, are you?" Nana asks, sitting down next to Mikumo, looking over his notes on all of the students. The young pro softly shakes his head, looking up once more to see what had changed as they start to really get more into using their quirk at full power. Most of them were throwing their attacks at these dummies that the teacher had found in a storage closet somewhere in the corner of the large gym, and it was making it quite easy to see how most of these students got it. The attack points. Their quirks were definitely meant for a lot of destruction. While Mikumo had wanted to see their full potential, he might just start getting them to work a little better with carefully handling an actual person when fighting a villain with their quirks. While in some cases it could be legal to kill a villain, it was still heavily frowned upon for almost everything. Even All for One was put into prison instead of being killed. Him and Tamura are the only people Mikumo will really willing kill, especially if they are ever to show up again. Well, more specifically, the ones from Mikumo's time. He personally hates to see them, and will fight tooth and nail to get the commission to agree with him on it. After all, the amount of people he had interacted with, and ended up dead by the hands of All for One, or someone else that works for the man, is insane. You don't exactly show mercy to a kind of guy that will do all that for just a quirk. However, none of these students were exactly training for All for One. That was Mikumo's job, and he never wanted to let these kids fight someone like the holders of All for One. Mikumo could do nothing but hope that nobody would show up with equal power, or something far too similar for the ninth one for all holders' liking. And then the bell rang, and the students were dismissed to their next class. Mikumo just waited in the gym, already flipped to a blank page, and awaiting his next class. They went through the same lesson, but were much more willing to push their quirk to their limit. After all, they had probably had to this multiple times before. They've already all gone through at least a year of this type of quirk training. I'd just say to not be too harsh on these first years, Akatani. They didn't go through a villain attack on their first week of school, and haven't exactly gotten to see what the real world and heroism is like. They're still careless, and haven't gone through many Aizawa scoldings. Yes, you need to let them know what the real world is like, but don't shove it all on them at once. Maybe have them go over an article or two on the news with what's going on, and select the articles yourself, Yoichi suggests, leaning against the wall, his own pair of green eyes carefully watching over the second years Mikumo was currently teaching. Mikumo didn't have much of a response. All he really did was shrug as he walked over to Tamaki, deciding that the future Big 3 student deserved a bit of a confidence boost. Besides, Mikumo can't just sit back and watch, when he's already noticed Tamaki clearly nervous about others watching him, and judging his quirk. And so Mikumo was able to spill out a waterfall of compliments to the current hero in training, not a single one of them a lie. Mikumo had always admired Tamaki's quirk, all the way to the time he saw the boys premiere in the first-year festival. He hadn't exactly done the best, but it was enough that the little Izuku stared with starry eyes, and messily wrote it all down. He did toss in a few suggestions to improve what Tamaki was doing, which the boy took with an embarrassed expression for not having thought of it sooner, and a quick thank you as he grabbed some food he had stuffed in his pockets in a tiny bag. Not much food, but enough to get his quirk to work. As classes finally started to draw to a close for the day, Mikumo closed his notebook with a satisfied smile, letting the pen rest between the pages as he starts to make his way to the parking lot. However, he did have to make a quick detour first, telling Lunch Rush that he managed to borrow a car from the commission for the day, and helped the cooking hero pick up a few of the dishes that were left behind. Only when that was done did he start to make his way down the halls again, and out to the car. He almost walked past it, but managed to remember that that was the car he was allowed to use for the day. And maybe the vestiges helped too. Nobody needed to know that though. As he drove home, he did make sure to take the time he could to talk to the vestiges, have a proper conversation with them instead of shaking his head or just nodding along, trying to not grab attention and make people think he was talking to thin air. And it'll just be really exciting to see what the sports festivals have gotten to look like. I mean, we only got a brief glimpse when Akatani here was up against that Shinso kid. But this still feels like our first festival since we died, Nana tells the other vestiges around her. For some of us, this will be our first, Yoichi says, leaning back into his seat as he watches out the window. True. I do wonder how the festival will go this year, especially now that we have the Midoriya of this timeline going though some more training, and we'll actually get a deeper understanding of the quirk, Toshinori says, giving Mikumo a quick smile. Maybe if you didn't suck at teaching and trying to manage time between one for all lessons, then I wouldn't have needed to give myself lessons on one for all and manage your schedule in this timeline, Mikumo teases, grinning a little as he gently nudges the eighth vestige. Toshinori looks away with a huff, crossing his arms as he begins to tap his foot. The other 3 vestiges in the car burst out into laughter, and even joining in on teasing Toshinori a little. It made the trip to the beach nice and peaceful, taking away all of the stress that Mikumo was feeling from knowing that he had to take care of so many events that could, and most likely would happen in the future. He was doing his best to change it all, but he was still struggling to do so, unable to remember just where everything was. It was frustrating as hell, and Mikumo was stressing over it really badly. He just wanted to fix things before they got bad again, and keep this timeline safe at least. He wants to at least fix things here, maybe try and work something out to where he can bring his friends, his mother, and Eri to this timeline, give them somewhere safe to stay instead of the hellish landscape that he left them in. It was only them who knew anyway, and the Namu and All for One holders weren't after all these other people. "Hey, kiddo, you're doing well," Nana says, reaching over to Mikumo and placing her gloved hand on his shoulder. Mikumo gave her a soft smile and then returned to looking ahead. Teaching Izuku went well, and before he knew it, the sun was already setting, and it was time for all of them to go home. "All right, time to go to bed, right?" Degoro asks, collapsing onto the bed as Mikumo walks into the bedroom, already walking over to his wardrobe, working on unbuttoning his shirt. "Nah, I've still got one last thing to do," he replied, taking out his hero costume and taking the shirt off. "Hey, where'd all those scars come from? You honestly weren't getting many before I left, and what happened? I know you told us all about your friends dying, and everyone else. But you never exactly told us what happened to you," Toshinori points out, walking a little closer as he spotted some of the scars. "We only really got to see the scar on your cheek, but we never really got to see that many. I mean, you guys are just blind if you didn't notice the new ones on my forearms," Mikumo says, pointing at the few scars that rested on his left arm, and one of the new ones on his left. They looked somewhat similar to the ones he had gotten on his hand and wrist in his first year, but were a little more uneven, definitely not done with medical care. Sure, there were also quite a few on his torso, but you can't exactly blame him for those careless moments. Each of them had happened not long after he lost someone, but I can excuse the others. Anyway, they're nothing much. Last big scar I got was 3 months ago." Mikumo gives a quick gesture to one of the deeper scars on his right side, just beneath his rib cage. But he shrugs right after, and slips his hero costume shirt over his head, and then onto his body. Only when he was done did he walk over to the window, quickly opening it, and beginning to slip out. "You've already done a lot today. I think you should get some rest instead of going out to do some hero work," En says, his eyebrows furrowed in worry. "Nah, still going to do some hero work. I can get some more rest later when I'm not busy teaching Midoriya, and then can get work done after school. But this is the schedule I'll have for 10 months, minus the weekend. Want to get out of the commission building sooner than later." Mikumo replies, giving a small boost of one for all to leap onto the roof of the building next to this one, the vestiges quickly following after. "I swear that you're going to suddenly pass out one day. This is why you still have those eye bags," Nana points out, using float and one for all to easily keep up with Mikumo, her arms crossed as she gives the 9th one for all holder a scolding look. Mikumo decides to pull a childish mood and sticks his tongue out at her before suddenly deciding to leap into an alleyway, snickering when he hears Nana's groan of frustration as she says, "A heads up would have been nice," and backs up to go into the alleyway, following after Mikumo with all of the others. It honestly doesn't take long for Mikumo to stumble across Shota, who impatiently stood outside a building, looking around the dark street, seemingly waiting for something. "Hello," Mikumo greets, slowly walking forward, and giving a quick wave to the other underground hero. Shota turns to Mikumo with a small glare, a finger to his lips before he says, "Still busy with that mission. Took forever to go over the plans, and we can finally get the attack done, and arrest this group that is selling a bunch of quirk drugs. Ooh, nice." Mind if I help a bit? Mikumo asks. I don't have anything else to do anyway. And you kinda just seem to be waiting around for now. You could kinda give me a bit more on the plan. And I adapt to villains I don't know really well actually. You've hardly been on this job for, what, a week? I've had years of practice. Besides, I wouldn't be teaching hero training for nothing. Right. All because you're a commission baby. Oh, ouch, Nana says. A hissing sound coming from the air she sucked in through her teeth. Mikumo can't help but let his shoulders slump at the remark. Commission baby was a term that some people used as some sort of insult. Not much, but it was still calling the people trained under the commission for years, especially since they were children. The children trained under the commission had a tendency to be a little more spoiled, got to know more, had much higher training than most of the people around them, and usually got a higher paycheck much quicker, no matter their rank. They were the commission's prize pupils after all. Mikumo may not think he could be qualified as a commission child, especially since he only really started getting tasked with stuff and paid closer attention to from the commission when he was 17. But it still hurt just a little to be called that. Okay, rude. But I would still like to help. Especially if this thing is such a huge pain for you, Mikumo says, crossing his arms as the friendly expression he tried to keep fades from his face. Fine. I don't have the time to go over quirk rundowns, but I can at least tell you the goal of the mission, and what exactly it is that we're after while we're in here. Maybe having someone new suddenly on the case will help, especially if there was a leak somehow, Shota decides, and quickly starts to go over what needs to be done, his voice quiet, but just barely loud enough for Mikumo to pick up all of it, nodding along as he listens to the explanation. It was finally time for Mikumo to get to do something a bit more entertaining than patrols. And it was something he never knew about before too. It was going to be fun for him, and he just knew it. He'll just have to keep reminding himself that he can only use smokescreen. Who knows, maybe En could feel a little flattered that Mikumo was deciding to use his quirk over all others for this. But he could also sneak in a bit more quirks while hidden in the smoke. He'll just have to be extra careful about it, and probably make sure none of the pros or police were around. That way the bright flickers of one for all can't be seen. It was when Naomasa Tsukachi, the lead detective on the case, and many of the UA cases that happened in Mikumo's timeline, walked up to them that they were finally able to go in. After a little bit of explanation at first, and quick introductions. We weren't exactly expecting any extra hands on this case, but it'll be nice in all honesty. We kinda need the help, considering a couple of the other pros on this case got called onto ones they found much more interesting than this, Naomasa explains, raising his arms over his head as he stretches, a small pop coming from his back as he leaned backwards. Well, I don't have anything better to do, and I haven't seen a racer all day, Mikumo replies as he excitedly starts skipping forward, towards the place Shota and Naomasa told him that they were going in. Oi, let me go in first, Shota says, his binding cloth suddenly wrapping around Mikumo, pulling the younger underground pro closer to the other, making a few of the vestiges laugh or giggle, especially with Mikumo's frustrated sigh. It wasn't much later that Shota took the cloth off, wrapping it back around his neck for the most part, only a bit of the fabric still resting between his fingers, ready for use whenever he needs it. It didn't take too long for them to finally get into the building, managing to find an entrance that let them walk along the beams that rested only a few feet below the tall ceiling. They weren't exactly planning on walking along the beams standing anyway, so it was decent enough, and they could definitely manage. Naomasa said that he and the rest of the police were going to go in through a different entrance though, and that there was one last pro hero that was in on the case. They wanted to try and cause a distraction at the main entrance, and make the job for Shota and Mikumo a little easier. You'll go down over there, Shota starts to explain, his voice brought down to a barely audible whisper, pointing over to a darker hallway, and then continuing as he points to another direction, saying, and I'll go down there. Take this as an opportunity to prove to me that you actually deserve your spot in the school. Mikumo gives the man one quick, excited nod before quietly moving from one beam to the next, quickly managing to get to the other hallway. The tricky part was figuring out how to get down quietly without activating float. This is the one time I'm going to help you on this mission, Shota says, leaving Mikumo confused for only a moment before the younger pro was suddenly grabbed around the waist, Shota making them both lean backwards as they swing down to the ground. The capture weapon wrapped tightly around the last beam, and successfully getting them onto the floor with hardly a single sound. Thanks for not screaming about it. Yep, Mikumo quickly replies, standing there for only a moment before running down the hallway, leaving Shota there to gather his weapon. Mikumo honestly didn't have much of anything other than the pocket knife he held on his belt, but he didn't really need it anyway. He was splitting off from Shota and had plenty of opportunity to use one for all to its full extent, without breaking anything, of course. All right, good luck, young Akatani, Toshinori says, running alongside Mikumo as he gets closer to the loud voices of the other people within the building. They sounded like they were always this noisy, and in general, really obnoxious. Mikumo felt like he was going to get a headache from here. All Might, I need you to go ahead and tell me how many people are in there, Mikumo whispers to the blonde, who nods as he runs down the hall without his successor, and Dagoro following after, leaving Mikumo with the rest of the predecessors. It wasn't much longer before the three ran back, and saying, using smokescreen definitely looks like a good idea in there. I counted 20 people, and a few of them look pretty massive. There's also a couple cases, which I think is where the drugs Eraserhead is talking about are at. They're talking about them being quirk boosters. Yeah, quirk boosters, Dagoro replies. Cool. At least they aren't quirk suppressants, Mikumo murmurs, continuing to walk forward. Don't forget that they'll be showing up sooner than later, Toshinori adds, Mikumo giving a small nod, already activating smokescreen, the thick smoke spilling into the hallway, and out into the room that the villains resided in. The villains were already making a panic out of it, a couple of them shouting, demanding to know who was there in the hallway. Nobody other than you, and these villains are nearby. Have fun, Nana says, a grin slowly forming on Mikumo's face as he begins to charge up one for all, the energy spreading along his skin, and then fading away as he finally got it to the percentage he wanted. It wasn't showing on his skin, but it definitely didn't stop the energy that would flicker around him as he moved. Show yourself, stop hiding in this smoke, one of the villains shout. Mikumo decided in that moment to suddenly leap forward, arms reaching out, managing to grasp onto one of the villain's shirts, and then tossing them to the side. The villain landed against the wall with a hard thud, but Mikumo wasn't going to keep focusing on that. He still had to get to the other villains, find them, and get this fight over with. If the quirk boosters are here, then he can't let a single one of them get away. And then there was the headache he got from danger sense. He quickly ducked down, heading the whoosh of something heavy going over his head. That must be one of the cases. He quickly kicked behind him, hearing a huge groan of pain coming from the villain behind him, and the case dropping to the floor. Yoichi grabbed his arm, making him reach out for the case while the ninth successor got up, keeping his fingers tightly wrapped around the case. Still one more case. They're going for the back exit, which should just be east, En tells him. Mikumo nods, hitting one of the villains running in his direction with a case, and smiling as they hit the ground. Might not be much progress, but he's still gotten a couple of them taken down. But he should be faster than this. Was he really getting a little rusty that quickly? With a quick boost forward, he managed to get to where the smoke was the thinnest, right where the last villain with a case was. The villain was frantically trying to open the door, the doorknob rattling as the villain tried to open the tightly shut door with one hand. I think you forgot a lock, Mikumo remarks, pointing towards the lock near the top of the door. The villain looks up in disbelief, and looks back to where Mikumo was, only to find that he wasn't there anymore. Mikumo was actually right behind the villain, and quickly landed a hard hit at just the right point to knock the person out. Grabbing the last case, he went to check on the stuff inside, knowing that the other 16 villains, or 18 depending on whether or not the other two got up, were unable to find him in the thick smoke. They probably didn't want to move from where they were standing very much either, waiting for Mikumo to come to them. That way they don't completely risk letting the young underground pro know where they were. Maybe it was a little funny when one of the villains whispered something similar to that, saying, "Don't move too much. Guys, don't even risk looking for each other to group up again. Let them find you. You dumbass, you're not supposed to speak. You're giving away our location." "Well, you just gave away yours too, so hush. You guys suck at being villains. Aren't drug dealers supposed to be quiet?" Mikumo teasingly questions as he closes the cases once more. The quirk boosters didn't look the best in all honesty, but were held in thick cases, plenty of cushion placed between all of the vials, and the glass holding the liquid thick. They were probably expecting to have to hit some people over the head with the cases, and didn't want to ruin their precious item. Fair enough, to be honest. At least Mikumo had yet another weapon, and this time, one that wouldn't cause too much damage. It didn't take too much longer to take care of the rest of the villains. "Akatani," Shota calls from the hallway that Mikumo came in on. Yeah, right here," Mikumo calls, deactivating smokescreen, and watching as it quickly faded away, revealing all 20 of the villains on the floor, unconscious. Mikumo would honestly say that he was really proud of his work here. "I could have sworn that this room only led out to this blocked-off part of the sewer system," Naomasa says as he walks in, looking around, Shota and the rest of the police that came here walking in right behind the detective. "Maybe. But it doesn't seem like anyone here knew about that. One of them was trying to get out through one of the doors, but they didn't get too far," Mikumo replies, shrugging a little to bring further attention to the cases. "Ah, so they were here," one of the officers say. "Waste of time working in that other room for so long, then. We were all beat by a commission baby, who wasn't even supposed to be here," the other pro hero says, walking into the room. Mikumo didn't exactly recognize them though. Might have been a hero who never really got much time in the spotlight, or was also an underground hero. Although, their outfit didn't really fit the general look for an underground hero. "Wait until they find out you're not actually raised by the commission," Nana says with a grin, trying to cheer Mikumo up a little. "Aw, damn. Wait until I tell you that they would have gotten away if that sewer system wasn't actually closed off. Or if they ran off while you guys were busy down that other hallway. Now appreciate the fact I got you the cases in the first place," Mikumo says, deciding to drop them to the floor. "And the fact that I took a lot of work off your plate. You're welcome. Young Akatani. They're all just jealous of commission-trained children. They don't like how many opportunities you're handed. And while you may not actually be a commission-trained child, they think you are," Toshinori says, trying to calm Mikumo down a little. He wasn't even that mad in all honesty. But it was really frustrating that these people were stuck thinking that the skill he had gained was from training since he was little. No, he had started all this practice as soon as he was UA, with 10 months longer of training to get a quirk. But it's fine. He takes in a deep breath and says, "My apologies. I spoke a little bit harshly. After all, I'm the one who asked to join this after all. I do hope you all have a wonderful night." And then he walks off, handing one case to Naomasa and one case to Shota. He'd just go deal with some more villains who were causing chaos in the middle of the night, and go home later. He probably just needed a bit of rest. "See you at work, Akatani," Shota calls. Mikumo just gives a quick wave, focusing on the conversation the predecessors were having at the moment. They felt a bit more interesting at the moment anyway. Training all of the first years to be ready for the sports festival was pretty fun, if you asked Mikumo. Their expressions whenever he talked about just how much more progress they could make, And whenever he mentioned things he figured they could do with their quirks, were absolutely hilarious. They would sit there, wondering how they hadn't thought of it, and would tend to be surprised that they could do it in the first place. But, to be fair, Mikumo is cheating just a tad bit with his knowledge on their quirks, recalling the notes he had taken on them when they were in their second year. And he got to watch their turn in the festival while he sat at home, recovering after breaking his arm really badly. So, he was using some of his knowledge from then, but had also managed to add on to it a bit, throw in some more of his ideas. Surprisingly, they were starting to do better. They were taking these lessons a little more seriously too, especially ever since Mikumo started giving them articles on how hero society was really going, and actually started taking a few of them out of the lesson to go work on paperwork, extremely similar to the ones that the pro heroes had to do after taking down villains, and especially when there was property damage. So they started to try and put more control into their quirks, prepare to have to use them against people if they needed to, and learn how to make much more direct attacks instead of just throwing something out there. The last thing Mikumo had went over with them before it was the first year's turn for the sports festival was trying to find a way out, while also having to avoid someone. Mikumo sort of forgot just how handy that lesson would be during the games that they'd have to play, and would only realize it when he was watching the festival be carried out. The day that it was finally time for the first year's sports festival, Sekijira, Shota, and Mikumo were all giving the hero course students a quick rundown of the expectations and the opportunities that would be opened up if they were to do this right. Just remember, Shota began as the time for them to walk into the arena was just a few minutes away, saying that you can easily be kicked out of the hero course. Vlad King may be very lenient about kicking you guys out, as is Akatani. But once Nezu truly sees how far you've come, or how far you haven't gone, that you aren't really trying, your spot in the hero course is easily removed, and you can be expelled or moved to general studies to work on your abilities, but with much more restrictions than what is placed on this course. Aizawa here is also hoping some of you get moved out of the hero course if people in the general studies course are able to prove themselves able to the staff. That way he can continue to get more sleep, Mikumo informs. All staff meet up to discuss your fates in your course, and the hero course and general studies course get a lot of say in this, especially the homeroom teachers. But, as a teacher for the entirety of the hero course, wouldn't you also say that you play a huge role in our fate, Akatani-sensei? A student asks, their hand raised into the air a little. I do. There's a reason I've been trying to push you all to do your best for the past week. Eraserhead is going to heavily criticize you all, and he goes into detail. It won't take him long to convince the other teachers that you are undeserving of your place, Mikumo replies, leaving all 20 of the first-year hero course students even more nervous than they were before. And considering that we're only one class, and that you're my homeroom, the fact that Shota will notice those things after hardly supervising your lessons will only further impact the end result of today. I'm hoping to not lose any of you. Besides, I would love it if Shota were to have people in his class again. It's frustrating to see him napping all the time, Sekijiro tells everyone, a few students giving a small, nervous nod. All right, now start to make your way to the arena. You guys are going to be introduced first, after all, Shota informs, shooing them out of the room. Only once they were all gone did Shota turn to Mikumo and say, Mike wants you to do the commentary with him for this year's festival, especially since he wasn't able to convince me to do it. When am I going to be informed of these things ahead of time? I still don't even know what the plan for the games this year is, Mikumo grumbles, stuffing his hands into his pockets as he gets up to leave the room, and then stopping in the doorway as he says, Where's the room anyway? I'll take you there. The walk to the room was pretty quiet, both Shota and Mikumo not exactly saying a single word to one another. To be fair, they haven't been talking to each other much at all ever since that one mission Mikumo had helped on. It felt a little awkward most of the time at this point, especially considering that they see each other so often. All right, there you go. Shota says when they finally reach another door after climbing plenty of stairs. The amount of rooms on the top floor was much fewer compared to the first floor, but that just made sense, almost as if he'd been waiting at the door the entire time. The moment Shota finished speaking, the door swung open, revealing none other than Hisashi Yamada. His hair gelled up into its usual style, and his hero suit still the same as always. "Akatani, great to see you," Hisashi exclaims before grabbing Mikumo by the arm, and then quickly dragging him into the room, slamming the door in Shota's face. He was probably a little upset about Shota declining the offer to make commentary on the student's performance, and the hurdles that they would have to face while doing this. Sounds a lot like Hisashi to be a little frustrated with the underground hero for doing that. Mikumo was just going to have to hope that he could have Shota still do commentary for the next year's sports festival. Okay, so here's the plan with the year's festival. It should have all the details you need to know. And then it also gives little ideas on how to introduce it, and what to look out for while the students work through it, Hisashi explains, handing the younger pro a small packet where the entirety of the festival's plans were neatly printed out. Little notes left in the corner from both Hisashi's and Nezu's plans for this. "Ooh, nice," Mikumo says, quickly flipping through the pages, getting the general idea of what was going on. He couldn't help but grin as he saw what the third event was going to be. A foam sword duel for the finals. I know. Feels a little boring," Hisashi laughs, only continuing speaking as his laughter started to die down, saying, "But we can't use real swords, and finals can't always be quirk duels, you know? We were talking about a quirk duel for next year, but we wanted to do something a little fun for this year. It'll be interesting to see how many people end up breaking their swords on accident. But if that happens, it'll probably be because they got a hit. If not, then they're just a little clumsy and hit something like the ground. Yep. And while breaking your sword during the duel results in the other person's win, there's one way around it. Deal the last hit needed to win the match. Mimori is going to be counting and looking very closely for a hit. However, generally, she'll be able to hear the hit. If she can't, you probably just missed in all honesty, or didn't get a good enough hit that would be qualified as one of the 5 needed. That's true. It'll be interesting to see how they go about it though, especially under the consideration that a lot of people here, especially the first years, don't have complete control over when they use their quirk. And since quirks can get you eliminated, especially if it ends up powering up your attack with the sword, tampers with the fighting area, or harms the other fighter, then you're eliminated. This one's pretty easy to lose in all honesty. True that. Just going to have to require a lot of thought on how to win, and looking out for your quirk, the boundaries of the fighting area, and then your opponent. Damn, wish I could have done this. It'll be really interesting to see if someone with pretty good sword skills makes it to the final, though. It'd be nice to see how quickly they can get that match done, and if they'll make it to the final part of the finals. And you've never gotten to participate in a sports festival, considering the commission trained you and all. You've really missed out on the fun and thrill you get from it. I know I had plenty of fun in my year. Shota was actually in general studies at the time, and had made his way into the hero course after that. We became quick friends, and he let me help with his hero name. There's a bit of a pause before Hisashi continued, saying, "Well, he just didn't have any idea on what to use, and it was a quick, on-the-spot thing that I came up with. But it's still stuck to this day, so that feels great." "I'm glad you get to be on Aizawa's good side," Mikumo says with a laugh. "I thought I was doing a bit better, but then I kinda joined him on a mission last week and pissed off one of the other pros that were there, and kinda shouted at everyone." "Oh, yeah, Sho's told me about that. Don't tell him that I told you about it. But he does seem to feel a little bad about it. Said that he had called you a commission baby a few times, even when it did seem to tick you off, and especially when it made you snap at everyone at the end of the mission. So, I wouldn't expect an apology from him, especially since he's still a little frustrated about you messing with him when you first joined the staff. But just know that he's feeling a little bad about it. You two are on a first name basis. Like, I haven't really pointed it out, but I do frequently notice you calling Aizawa by his first name, or a shortened version of it. We've just been through enough together that we kinda do that. And besides, we've known each other since high school. Just got a really close bond after all that time, Hizashi explains. Oh, interesting, Mikumo says, his eyes once more returning to the packet after a quick glance out of the large window, but then slowly starting to grin. He looks back up at Hizashi, and then says, "So, are you two together? Are you just too nervous to say anything? Or is this really just a really close friendship?" Hizashi goes a bright red before turning to the controls, quickly turning on the microphone, dodging Mikumo's question as he practically yells the introductions to the entirety of the people watching today. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all of you lovely listeners. Welcome to day one of the sports festival, where we'll be watching the first years compete for first place, and to prove themselves to all of you. First off, let's bring in the one and only hero course class this year. Hizashi's voice quickly drops as he speaks the next sentence, saying, because someone expelled his entire class, and then returning to the previous tone he had, saying, here's Class 1B. He proceeds to go through the introductions for the rest of the first years, introducing them by course and class, and then letting Mikumo call out for which first year was going to be doing the speech to start the festival. They had actually scored second, but considering the first place student was expelled, they were, on technicality, the first place scorer in the entrance exam. Mikumo felt like he should have expected this student to be the one to score first place, especially considering into consideration just how destructive this person's quirk was against anything and everything. Those bots were probably a breeze for them. At least this person's speech wasn't anything like the one Katsuki had done for Mikumo's year in the festival. Speaking of which, Mikumo is definitely going to have to work on fixing that with Katsuki. Oh, hey, since he can interfere with anything, maybe he can also get to talk to Katsuki a little as both Izuku and Katsuki go home. After all, Mikumo's first paycheck is going to be coming in soon, so he'll be on the street anyway. Mikumo is just going to need a good reason to confront Katsuki, work on fixing the boy's temper. It honestly might have to include Mikumo mentioning that he teaches Izuku, and has been for a little while. Now, for the first event, Mikumo starts. Already have taken a look through the requirements for this round. He says, it's going to be a race where each student is to fend for themselves, and figure out how to safely pass each student without knocking themselves out. Each student is going to be given a small vehicle, able to pick one of their choosing. None of them are in an absolute shit condition, but some are better than others, whether it be in appearance or performance. But don't forget, listeners, the appearance definitely isn't everything in this, Hizashi adds. Yep, doesn't mean that all the good ones for this race are going to look plain though. Anyway, think of this a little like a racing game, especially Mario Kart. There's a limit of people that will be accepted into the next round. But just know that the second you're knocked off the track, you're eliminated. But if we don't meet the limit, we will have to grab a few people who went out of the boundaries, or broke some of the rules. Both Hizashi and Mikumo were taking turns explaining the first game, making sure the students knew exactly what they were doing, and telling them that there was a function within all of the vehicles that would prevent anyone from crashing into the people around them, making them start to slow down if they were to get too close, and to come to a complete stop if the vehicle is going to crash into the one in front of it. This would prevent accidents, and would also give the students a reason to want to keep everyone at a distance. There was also very easy functions in the vehicles to help those who don't have any knowledge on driving. That way everyone could participate and have equal enough opportunities to win. 10 minutes later, all students were ready to go, and Mimiri had already gone through, checking that each student had buckled themselves up. This game had a whole bunch of precautions put in, but it didn't mean that this wouldn't be dangerous, or that things wouldn't ever fail to work properly. The track was huge and was pretty wide. That was to ensure that students could keep a good enough distance if they were going the same speed, and make sure that the hundreds of students down there would get through with ease. How did Nezu even get all of those cars anyway? Now, we know that a race with cars between teenagers seems like a bad idea, but let's hold some trust in these students. Good luck to all, and Nimiri, feel free to get this race going. Hizashi was extremely loud, speaking naturally. But the sudden shout as he waited for Nimiri to start the race left Mikumo quickly backing away, hands flying to the sides of his head to cover his ears. Damn, it hurt. A lot of people in the seats, waiting to see how the first tournament was going to go, seemed to agree with the time traveler. A couple moments later, Nimiri let the students start going, and the cars immediately started speeding past. Well, except for a few of them. Both Hizashi and Mikumo sighed, knowing the exact reason why those students wouldn't be going anywhere. And it wasn't because they were confused or unsure how to start moving. They all had gone through a quick lesson as they picked out their vehicles. Hey, did you know that taking off your seatbelt won't let these vehicles go anywhere? It's a safety feature that was put in place to further ensure student safety. So, if you don't buckle up, you can't start the race. You have 10 seconds to buckle up and get that car going before we call you out of the vehicle, and you're eliminated, Mikumo warns. It doesn't take long for those cars to get going and make their desperate attempts at catching up to those ahead of them. Hizashi continues to give the rest of the commentary for the next while, and to being the person to happily announce who was moving on to the next tournament. Only when those people were decided did Mikumo take his turn at speaking. This was his favorite event in the festival, after all, and he'd hate to pass up the opportunity to explain. However, before he could do that, Ken walked up, placing his large, gray hands against the ground beneath him, and making a large maze in the arena. The pathways could only fit about 2 or 3 people at max, and they all made plenty of dead ends. Each wall was enough for one person to walk on without too much of a chance of falling, which was going to work quite well for this part of the festival. All students who were able to participate in this round were unable to go into the seats like the rest of their classmates that hadn't passed in the first tournament. That way they couldn't get a little sneak peek into how to get through the maze. Welcome to the second game in this year's sports festival, Mikumo started, the tone of his voice very clearly expressing just how excited he was to be able to announce what was going on. As you can tell, the entire stadium beneath all of you has become a large maze for this part. Only 16 people can make it though to the final part of the festival. And since everyone is being split into 2 teams, the first 8 people on each team will be the people moving on. And so he went into a long explanation on his this was going to work, talking about how one team was going to be students who were supposed to run through the maze and try to find the end of the maze, get to the other end. The first 8 to make it would be able to move on. The other half would be people who were able to start at the top of the maze and were tasked with catching the players running along in the maze. After those people were given a 30-second head start, of course. Each team will have a certain color vest that they're supposed to wear. The people running through the maze will be wearing blue, and those who are out to catch them will be wearing red. Easy enough, and makes it easy for us and the students to know who and what to look out for, Mikumo finishes. All right, look on the screens at the top of the arena and figure out which team you've been placed on. All have been randomly selected, so do have fun, Hizashi tells the students. Not too much later, the match officially starts, and the students selected to go through the maze have the full promised 30-second head start. Plenty of quirks were being put to use for this, which was pretty good, considering that none of them would really be able to be put to use for the next match. Mikumo still wished that they would have been able to use their quirks, especially considering he was working with his students so hard this week to bring them to their full potential. While they still weren't there yet, they were definitely much closer than they previously were. Who knows? They might actually be able to stay in the class after today. About 20 minutes later, the 16 that would be able to move on to the next game were decided. A good chunk of those students were from the hero course, but there were also 2 support department students and 4 general studies students, and 1 business student that had made it, leaving 9 hero course students. The fact that there was a business student going to the finals was really surprising. In Mikumo's sports festival, all of the business students intentionally failed in the first one, deciding to prioritize their analytical skills for the next couple games instead. It was interesting to see what this year was like. Mikumo let Hisashi announce the final part of the festival, and how it would be a one-on-one match that only one person could proceed on. It was practically going to go the same as the one Mikumo got to do, but with foam swords instead of quirks. He just had to hope that the kids down there could keep the heroes interested enough in their skills and get scouted by someone who would want to use their talent. After all, not only was this festival the determining point in whether or not you could keep your place in the class, but it was also to open up further career opportunities for the first years. This was the beauty of the festival, and Mikumo would never not appreciate what it was able to do for him. After all, without that internship, he probably wouldn't be where he is with One for All today. Gran Torino was a huge help, but Mikumo was still helping to help Izuku avoid the internship if he could. But speaking of the internship with Gran Torino, Mikumo did have to find out where Stain was and what he was doing. After all, Mikumo knew that Stain hadn't exactly started going on his killing spree until sometime after Mikumo joined UA for his first year, and had quickly become known for the quick rate of which he was taking care of pro heroes. If Stain wasn't already committing crime, Mikumo would be stuck having to try and prevent the man from starting his killing spree. The question was if Mikumo could manage to track the man down or not. Although, Mikumo had heard something about the hero killer having a vigilante era. This meant that Mikumo may have to try and manage to talk to a vigilante and see if they could help him. He'd have to be a little descriptive about Stain's quirk and appearance as best as he could, and would also have to hope that he could find the right person, someone he could trust. It was going to be difficult, but there wasn't exactly anything else Mikumo was doing at the moment to save the world. But stopping Stain would also be able to stop a whole bunch of other things. For example, he'd be able to stop a lot of villains, like Himiko and Taoya, from being inspired by Stain's motives, and then joining Tamura for his cause. He could do this, he could do this, he could do this. "Hey, you okay?" Hisashi asks, gently placing his hand on Mikumo's shoulder, making the younger pro suddenly jump, his seat rolling away with him a little. "Ah, sorry. Didn't mean to startle ya." "Oh, it's fine. I was just getting really lost in thought, trying to figure out what to do for work this afternoon," Mikumo replies. "Oh, okay. Just making sure you're okay, and letting you know that you can still add in commentary for the duels." "Yep, I know. But thanks for checking up on me." The rest of the festival went by pretty quickly, and before Mikumo knew it, it was time to hand out the medals. Nezu was the person who was handing them out, but with Nimiri's help. The principal was sitting on the woman's shoulders, medals held in his paws, and gently being put over the designated students' heads. "Just remember that all of you did a wonderful job. There's still plenty of progress all of you could make to further improve, but everyone here has really shown off their capabilities. I can't wait to see what other things you'll have to show next year," Nezu exclaims, excitedly beginning to clap his paws together, the crowd following after his example not too much later. Once all of the people were leaving U.S. grounds, Mikumo started to head out himself not too much later. But it was as he was going through the entryway that he saw the commission president begin to walk over out of the corner of his eye. She seemed to have been waiting next to the entryway for a little while, waiting for Mikumo to finally walk through. "Hello, ma'am. I wasn't expecting to see you here today," Mikumo tells her, and she gives a small nod in return before opening her mouth to speak. "Well, considering that you come back to the building quite late, I decided not was the best time to try and get your attention before I can only catch you as you run into the building. She begins, clearly at the last straw, with Mikumo constantly sneaking out through the window, and then leaving it unlocked to return to later. I have a mission for you, and I need you to be ready for it in 2 hours. The police and detectives have found something that I need taken care of, and I figured you're the best person I have to do something so last second, and can comprehend a quick rundown of the situation before I send you on your merry little way. Ma'am, I have something I need to do this afternoon, Mikumo tries to tell her, already planning on meeting up with Toshinori and Izuku this afternoon to help teach a bit more with One for All. Are you going to get paid for it? No, but, well, you're getting paid for this, and we're going to pay you pretty damn well for getting this done. Just make up for it tomorrow, she interrupts, clearly not allowing for any arguing on the situation. The vestige Toshinori places his hand on Mikumo's shoulder to try and reassure High Successor that everything was going to be fine, and that he really could make up for the missed lesson on the next day. Mikumo still needs a phone that'll work here though, so if he just goes now, then Izuku and the living Toshinori are going to be wondering where he is for the entirety of today's training. So he turns to the commission president and says, "Then I need to tell the person that I won't be able to meet up with them this afternoon. If you don't mind, I'm just going to take a quick trip to tell them, and then can return later. Just give me half an hour, and I'll be back. If you even go 1 minute above that time, I'm putting a lock on your window that only I can unlock. Do you understand?" Mikumo gives her a thumbs up, and immediately starts running, only activating One for All once he knew he was out of the view of everyone, and then making his way up onto the rooftops to get to the beach faster. He got to the beach with 20 minutes to spare, Toshinori and Izuku already there, the symbol of peace going over what they were going to do that day. As he spotted Mikumo, Toshinori quickly smiled, waving as he said, "There you are. I was honestly expecting you to be a little bit late today, especially since you've been helping with the sports festival. Okay, so I don't have much of time at all, but I'm not going to be able to help at all this afternoon since the commission is absolutely requiring that I help with something today, and I don't have any choice in the matter. Anyway, gotta go. Enjoy training," Mikumo explains, some of his words jumbling together as he spoke. But they'd get the message, and he quickly turned around to run to the commission building, once more holding off on activating One for All until he was out of view of all people. He made it back into the commission building with 11 minutes to spare, and practically collapsed to the floor as he reached the couch in the lobby. "Akatani, welcome back," the woman at the front desk says, pressing a few buttons on the desk phone next to her, and almost immediately, the other line picked up. "Hello, ma'am. Akatani has made it back with good timing, and is currently on the lobby couch waiting for you." "All right, yes ma'am, I'll let him know." "What's up?" Mikumo asks as the woman sets the phone down. "You're needed in her office." "You know where to go," the woman says, and Mikumo groans as he pushes himself off the couch and makes his way to the elevator. He was just going to save energy and not deal with the stairs. God, he just wanted to sit around and help with training Izuku. He was kinda just feeling really tired at the moment.